Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
There's an old saying that loose lips sink ships. Sometimes the best way to resolve a problem or a situation is to wait it out. The problem we humans have is that we are so busy trying to push the situation to get the problem behind us that we lose sight of what's right in front of us. After 3 years of marriage, my loving wife had filed for a divorce while I was on a 2-week run in the farthest corner of the company's sales territory. We sold computers to set up to run certain lines of equipment. I was one of the few that could also install them. As a result, I had been sent in to set 3 new installments up. In the divorce petition was the reason why she had filed. According to a third-party statement, I was having an ongoing affair with her father's secretary. It was Humus because his secretary worked at his state capitol office. That was 275 miles roughly from where we lived in Jackson, Missouri. It made it sound like I was taking 2 days a week to travel to the capital to stay overnight in a hotel and drive back the next day. Upon my first day back, I was fired. No reason was given, but I was paid what was due according to the state's labor laws. I believed but could not prove it was because of what was being claimed by my wife in her divorce petition. My boss and my wife's family were members of the same community church. I smelled a setup. I had only met my father-in-law's secretary once, and that was during our formal engagement party. She had tried to come on to me, and I had shut her down. Someone had seen the chance for advantage and went for it. The question was who and why now. Rachel's father was more of a follower than a man who could stand on his own. He got into politics only when his father had decided to retire. His great-grandfather, a career politician, had known when the interstate was going to be built and had bought the land around it all throughout the state. He had one rule. He only leased the land for development. When the lease ran out, the improvements torn down ready for new development. The family ended up using some to develop their own in chain and bought other businesses. When he died, the family was super rich as a result and had continued on as he did. It was almost like a golden parachute for the whole family. He had won the seat in a landslide and had kept it ever since. It hadn't even been a week since I had been served in here. We were standing before Judge Donald McDonald. I had not even hired a lawyer and was sleeping at a friend's place until I got back on my feet. My wife's lawyer, a well-known feminist who was from state capitol, wanted to get the court moving towards the divorce. Even to the judge, this just seemed to be rushed, and he wondered why. He was hoping to find something that would slow down the plaintiff's rush for judgment. It gave us both reasons for wanting to slow things down. What had stuck out right away was that my wife's lawyer had scheduled the first appointment before the judge the same day she filed. I listened with interest to what she had to say in her opening statement. The judge then asked me what I had to say. Your Honor, 2 things have happened. First of all, we are all here before you because of hearsay. There is no proof. As for my wife Rachel and I, as far as I knew, everything was fine. I said. Secondly, I believe it's primarily because my wife Rachel is about to come into the rest of her family trust. Under state law, when that happens, I automatically would be entitled to half if we got divorced. How soon is that going to happen? The judge asked. On her 25th birthday, which in less than 6 months away, I said. The judge picked up the petition and read the complaint through in full for the first time. After pausing for a few, he said, Mr. Richards, do you have anything further to add? Only that my former boss is my wife's father's best friend. They, like my wife and I, are members of the same church. When I returned from my last sales trip, I was terminated, and no reason was given. I explained. I request that my wife be forced to pay my lost wages until this is resolved. Her current trust is worth $10 million and is still being controlled by her father. On her next birthday, she gets full access to the rest, which will bring the total amount up to $100 million. At that time, according to the way the trust was set up, her father also loses his control over it. The judge turned to the feminist lawyer and asked, Do you wish to dispute the facts that were just explained to me, Ms. Livingston? No, Your Honor, that's why I filed, because the wife feels that there is no way they as a couple can work their differences out. Ms. Livingston explained. The judge saw me smiling. Any further thoughts, Mr. Richards? Only one, Your Honor, I said. My wife is 6 weeks pregnant with our first child, and I think that she is being influenced by others because of my point of view. Having perked the judge's interest, he said, Explain further, please. My wife's family and friends are all politically aligned with one party's point of view. I am an independent with more of a conservative point of view, I said. I feel her extended family are afraid that I am going to expose our unborn child to my point of view. With the political environment we are living with, the fact that hearsay is being used implies that this may be the very cause. There's no proof of that, Your Honor, Ms. Livingston said with excitement. You can't allow hearsay to be used in court. The judge looked at me with a big smile, then turned to my wife's lawyer. You're right, Ms. Livingston, we can't accept hearsay. That is why you're going to get the lady who provided the statement to appear before me so she can give the names of the party and their legal addresses who claim to witness these things happening. I want them so I can subpoena them so they can testify before me in court, the judge said in anger. And since Mr. Richards, as you have pointed out, has been evicted from his own house and fired because of those same influences that started this, I'm ordering Mrs. Richards to pay him $5,000 a month temporary support, retroactive from the day this was filed before the court, so his first payment is due. Your Honor, you can't do this, Ms. Livingston said. The witness lives and works in the Capitol. Was your client's husband allowed to get anything out of the house? Did his wife confront him with the accusation? Judge Donald asked. No, Your Honor, to both questions, she replied. This statement was just recently obtained. By whom? You acted just like a politician, saw a chance to earn $1 and take advantage of a situation to affect the outcome. Judge McDonald said firmly. Come back and hear again, Ms. Livingston, with a divorce that appears to be over the difference of views of those outsides of the family itself, and I will hold you in contempt. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, she said meekly. Ms. Livingston, in my court, I expect both parties to physically present, so have her here the next time you appear. One more question, who is paying your bill? The judge asked. John Brownstone, she answered. The local representative for the State House, the judge said, who spends 90% of his time at the state capitol. Yes, Your Honor, I said. He's my father-in-law. How do you get along? The judge asked. We tolerate each other, I said. When he starts talking about making the country a socialist country, I leave the room. We both know each other's views and I see his conduct as trying to put a wedge between my wife and I. So, you haven't talked to your wife since you have been served? The judge said. No, Your Honor. I did swing by the house to talk to her, but learned from the security hired by her father to watch the place that she was out of town and that the locks had been changed. She has either changed her phone number or blocked me. Ms. Livingston, where is Mrs. Richards currently residing? The judge asked. In the Capitol, with her father. Ms. Livingston responded. I see this is looking more and more like a hit job to me. Looks like Mr. Richards' view of things is exactly what is happening. I expect you both to appear before me a week from today at 9 a.m. The court is adjourned. The judge said. I showed up in court with a lawyer this time. I could see my wife Rachel sitting beside Ms. Livingston and a lady I did not know. After taking the bench, Judge Donald McDonald went right to work. Ms. Livingston, has the defendant being paid the court-ordered alimony? The judge asked. No, Your Honor. Her father is refusing to allow it to be paid out of the trust. Ms. Livingston replied. Let me address your client directly and have her answer through the mic. The judge said. Mrs. Richards, you are of legal age, are you not? Judge Donald asked. Yes, I am, Rachel replied. Where are you residing at this time? The judge asked. With my father at the house in Jefferson, Rachel replied. You are living off of your trust right now. What were you using for money these last 5 years? My husband and I both worked very hard. We did not need to touch the trust. 5 weeks ago, I told my father that I wanted some of the trust money to remodel one of the bedrooms into a nursery. Rachel explained. He decided I should quit my job because I could use the trust money. My husband said no, we can make it on our own. My father said he didn't want anything affecting the birth of the child, and my working may do that. This letter used to file from a divorce. How did you come in possession of it? The judge asked. My father said it was mailed to his office, and he brought it to me. Did your father out and out refuse to write the check from the trust for support? The judge asked. No. He said I should refuse to settle or pay anything until all the lawyers have worked everything out. Rachel said. So, since we need both our signatures on any trust check, he just refused to sign. Bad mistake, Mrs. Richards. I'm holding you in contempt of court. Officer, escort the lady to jail as soon as this hearing is over. What your father says or does has nothing to do with this case. You, in my eyes, are an adult and will be treated accordingly. Mrs. Richards, I order you to turn over possession of the marital home to Mr. Richards since you are not residing there. He helped pay for it, so he has just as much right to be there as you. Ms. Livingstone, if Mr. Richards is not back in his home by 4 this afternoon, I will hold you responsible. I looked at my wife as her face turned white. It was fun watching her have to deal with the fact that her father's wisdom had led her directly to jail. There was no way her dad could get here before the end of the court day, which meant Rachel would be exposed to a world she had never seen. Ms. Livingston was beginning to realize that she was not dealing with a liberal-minded judge. Ms. Livingston, I presume the other lady is the one that wrote the notarized hearsay letter claiming that there was an affair, so have her approach the mic. Name, age, occupation, and address, please. The judge said. Nora Charles, 34, an office clerk at the Capitol. She said before disclosing her address. Do you have the names and addresses I requested? The judge asked. Yes. How do you know these ladies? The judge asked, having a pretty good idea of what she was going to say. I work with them at the Capitol. She responded. She then walked up and handed him the list. Handing the paper to a clerk, he said, have the subpoenas drawn up and served. All charges are to be assigned to the plaintiff. Ms. Livingston was livid. She had never seen a judge act like him. Are there any further items to bring up today? The judge asked. How long will Mrs. Richards be held? Until someone presents this court with the alimony for this and next month's support. The judge said. Your Honor, that's not fair. Surely there is some wiggle room here. Ms. Livingston said. It appears that the only reason any of us are here is because of the conduct of a father who can't stay out of his daughter's business. The judge said firmly. It's obvious this situation is really all about the trust Mrs. Richards is coming into. Her father sees himself losing his control over it and her. He also seems to believe that if you don't live with the same views of things, you're a danger to his influence over his adult daughter. Therefore, Ms. Livingston, get to this court by next Friday a copy of Mrs. Richards's trust. The court is dismissed. I watched the court officer escort my wife out of the court across the street to the county jail. I knew it had to be humbling for her. The problem was she was constantly pulled by her father to help further his political career. I had refused to allow her to become the social butterfly he required. By marrying his daughter, I had brought an end to his eager pawn. For the first time in her life, she had to live within a budget. I realized that he had been slowly drawing her back into her former lifestyle. While I was on my last sales trip, he had gone for the kill. Everybody had underestimated the judge except for me. I had noticed Rachel that first year at Southeast Missourian University. Who wouldn't? She was a real looker. I knew that the men would be lining up to get the chance to date her, and I was right. With long black hair, a slender softy body whose natural curves drew you, and she could easily capture a man's attention and did. She had a too trusting personality which, if taken advantage of, could cause a lot of problems. She seemed to be involved in all social or political activities. It was and never would be my cup of tea. I had more important things to do. I had to work to eat and for room and board. For my parents, my borrowing the funds to attend school was too much. We were taught from being young to find a way to pay our way. It took 4 years, but I graduated with honors, just barely making it. There were rumors not proved that her graduation certificate was bought and paid for. 6 months later, John Brownstone was doing a tour with his daughter in a plant where I was installing the latest computer system and programming it. She strolled over to introduce herself, and when I got up to say hello, I was welcomed with the greatest smile. "Hi, David, we went to school together, but I never saw you outside of class," Rachel said. "We thought you were an introvert." "No, I had to work full-time to get through school," I disclosed. So, between school, studying, and full-time work hours, my social life got set to the side. Since then, I have lived as cheap as possible to cut down my student debt as much as possible. "Will you be in Cape Girardeau on Friday?" she asked. "Yes, I work out of Cape, so I still live there," I said. "I should be finished setting this new system tonight. I will spend tomorrow making sure it's all working before heading back." "Applebee's Friday is 7 then?" Rachel said. "It's a date," I replied. About an hour and a half later, just as I was finishing up, the general manager came over and told me that the representative's daughter had been asking questions about me. I told him that we had gone to school together but associated with different crowds. He smiled and said, "There's something in you that she's attracted to, young man, so be careful because that lady is marriage material." We met and the evening went well. We went to a bar along the University Row and had a few dances. I guess she got upset when I didn't ask her for a second date. When she asked her friends what was wrong with her, they told her the simple truth. He still sees you as belonging to a separate world. He has worked hard to get where he is. You haven't worked an honest day in your life, nor do you appear to want to. He's at the point where he's ready to settle down and start a family. That means joint responsibility and an approach to life you don't have. You're still spreading your wings and living like nothing means anything. It had upset her family when she took a job, got an apartment, and started living in the real world like everyone else. It didn't take long for her to realize that she had no clue about how the real world worked. For Rachel, it was a life-changing experience. She was learning at her age what it was like to do the basics like cooking, dishes, and laundry. We all saw her struggle with normal things we do in life as she learned them as an adult. Some of her high-class friends dumped her as a result. They couldn't understand what she meant when she told them they needed to get off their privileged life and discover the reality of most. It had been a rough 6 months, but I had noticed she was adjusting. So, one Saturday, I saw her in the mall sitting on a bench looking sad and lost in thought. I went over and sat down beside her. "Rachel, there's a community dance being held on the fairgrounds tonight. Would you like to go with me?" I asked. "Why now?" she asked in complete surprise. "Because you now understand the world I live in and can see some of the phoniness of yours," I said. "As a result, you have grown up a lot the hard way. You have shown great courage and determination these past few months and have earned my respect." We learned that night that we both love to dance. It was fun to see her actually enjoy herself without having any airs influencing her. She asked me on the way home why she'd been accepted by so many without question. I said, "Because you were just being yourself. For a person with your upbringing, that speaks volumes." As I walked her to her apartment door, we kissed for the first time. It wasn't long until we were seen as a couple. Her mother was thrilled with the changes in her daughter. It amazed her to find out that she had learned to be a pretty damn good cook. Her father was another story. He was not impressed that his daughter was becoming a well-balanced adult woman. He hated me because I would not discuss politics with him. One night, out of frustration, he went at me. His wife and daughter were shocked when I went at him, using his own arguments against him like the skilled politician he thought he was. Later, privately, Rachel's mother warned us that her husband hated to be made to look like a fool. "David, he expected you to fold because he thought you knew nothing. He was not prepared for the facts that came from your lips. He thought you were a shallow person. You proved you're not. He will hold a grudge until it forces him to try to take you down. I had learned young that power and influence earned was always respected by the one earning it. When being handed it on a silver platter, it became a tool to keep others under your control, and it became corrupted. It had been at my parents' place on Christmas Eve that I got down on my knee and presented the ring to her. Less than a year later, we were married. Her father wanted to make it the biggest event of the year. Rachel had shot that down fast. It was Monday afternoon before I went to see her. Rachel needed that time to think things out. Judge McDonald had done us all a favor by throwing her in jail. Her high and mighty father couldn't get to her now. Her mother had always been a buffer for us from him until they got divorced. I watched her walk in looking sad and depressed until she saw who her visitor was. Seeing it was me, she broke into a smile as the tears started to flow. Sitting down across from me, she said, "He did it again, didn't he?" "Looks like it," I replied. "I was told you had filed because of your affair," Rachel said. "When did you figure it all out?" "When Ms. Livingston had to reveal who was paying her bill," I said. "What's behind all of my dad's actions? It has to be more than just revenge against you?" Rachel said, "To me, it boils down to something that must be hidden in the trust." I said, "Because for some reason he wants our marriage ended before it fully takes effect." "When did you figure it out?" I asked. "You got to understand that being pregnant has got my emotions working irrationally at times. Dad broke the phony news of your affair, and I lost it." Rachel said, "If he put something in front of me, I signed it because I was upset over losing you. This weekend out of boredom I read all the documents. When I read that it was Dad's secretary that you're accused of sleeping with, I knew he had set us up. So, what are you going to do after you get released from jail?" I said with a big grin. "Going home with my hubby after telling my father we are done." Rachel said, "Remind me to tell my mother about his latest stunt." "I'm just glad we figured it out before our marriage was destroyed," I said. "Thanks for not saying I was a fool for falling for his bullshit," Rachel said. "If you were half the man you are, you still would be a better man than my father. David, always remember that I fell in love with the man you are. Don't ever change. It's you that keeps me grounded. Mom said you coming into my life made me a better and different person. She was right. My value and outlook about things have changed so much. I am so mad at myself for allowing myself to be drawn back into the bullshit." I went and visited my wife every day until Friday. We talked about everything. Rachel and I were surprised to learn that the judge did not want us sitting with our lawyers when we appeared before him this morning. The sheriff's department officer who told us said the judge does not want us identified before certain people are required to testify. As a result, my wife would be deliberately held back and would arrive late in her everyday clothing. Rachel and I walked hand in hand the Friday morning from the county jail and slid into the back of the courtroom just as Judge McDonald took his seat. "I see the three ladies who claim to have witnessed the romantic relationship of David Richards are here," the judge said. "I would like them to go stand beside him if he is here in this court." Rachel and I watched as the three ladies went over and stood beside a man sitting with her father, John Brownstone. "David Richards, will you please approach the bench?" the judge requested. The room went into shock as I stood up and joined the man the ladies had pointed out heading to the bench. When we both had almost reached him, he told us to stop. "Rachel Richards, would you come forward and identify which man is your husband?" the judge asked. Rachel came forward. Her eyes and face were smiling big time. Once she reached us, she stood beside me, taking my hand into hers. It appears that these three ladies had witnessed an affair by someone using David's name in a deliberate attempt to destroy his marriage and ruin his life, the judge said before going on. The question came to me was who would benefit from having this marriage break up? Who had the financial means to pay for it? I had to ask myself why. Those reasons were why I ordered that a copy of the trust be supplied to my office. I had a trust lawyer review it. "Stan Johnson, can you step forward and testify what you learned?" Rachel looked at me and whispered, "Do you know anything?" I whispered back, "No." Putting all the legalese into common language, there is a clause that says if Rachel Brownstone is not married by her 25th birthday, full control goes to her father until she reaches the age of 40. He said, "Since she is, it has legally been hers since the day she got married. Not has only the court been scammed, but it appears that Rachel has too." Stan, send a copy to the Attorney General office. Inform him of what we now know. Since John Brownstone is our state representative, it should be his office that investigates the situation to see if criminal charges should be laid. The judge said, "Does the plaintiff have something to say?" "Yes, Your Honor, I do." Rachel said, "I wish to withdraw my petition for divorce." "Granted." Judge McDonald said, "Hire Stan to get your trust legally in your hands." The court is dismissed. We watched the man claiming to be me taken in for questioning, along with her father who looked defeated. Ms. Livingston handed me the envelope containing the $10,000. "Mr. Richards, you could probably sue your father-in-law for a lot more than this," Ms. Livingston said. "I wonder how much they were all paid to try to get the divorce done." "We don't have to," Rachel said. "He has just written himself out of his grandchildren's lives forever." Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
I'm a 36-year-old man, and I feel like my world is crashing down. I love my wife, Gabby, who's 32, but I'm terrified she might be doing something behind my back. The idea is too embarrassing and messed up to talk about with friends or family. What's worse is that I think one of my coworkers might have slept with her, and everything I've seen so far seems to confirm my fears. Let me explain how we got here. I met Gabby in 2014 at a mall in our city. I was in the food court, standing in line, when I saw her. Funny thing is, I was actually heading to another restaurant, but the line was too long, so I switched. That's when I noticed her, standing near the front, looking absolutely stunning. She caught me staring, laughed, and said she wasn't in line for food. Gabby explained that she was waiting for her cousin, who worked there. Her breaking the ice saved me because I was at a loss for words. We hit it off as we chatted, and I tried to be as funny and charming as possible. When I offered to buy her something while she waited, she asked for a strawberry lemonade. After getting it for her, we continued talking until her cousin came out. Before she left, I mustered the courage to ask for her number, and she gave it to me. That was the start of everything. I did everything I could to win her over. We went on dates, attended events, and even hung out with our friends as a group. By 2017, we were married. Together, we've built a life with 3 amazing kids, 2 daughters and a son. Our journey hasn't been easy, but we've made it work, cutting back on nights out at clubs and concerts while still finding time for occasional fun. Gabby has always been an amazing partner and mother, and I've felt incredibly lucky to have her. Gabby is Cuban, stunningly gorgeous, and has always stood out. My friends used to tease me, saying I'd scored big time. She looks like a mix between Gal Gadot and Salma Hayek, with a curvy figure, tattoos on her arms, and her signature ponytail that she always wears in selfies. Professionally, Gabby works alongside her sister as an interior decorator, and together they do really well for themselves. Meanwhile, I work as a maintenance man, a job I've loved for the past 7 years. Things took a dark turn last Wednesday. There's a guy at work, Daryl, who works in the shipping area. We're not exactly friends, but we're acquaintances and often chat during lunch, usually about basketball. The most time we've spent together outside of work was playing dice in the parking lot a while back. One weekend, my car had brake problems, so Gabby had to drive me to work and pick me up afterward. The first time she came to pick me up, she accidentally arrived 30 minutes early and had to wait in the parking lot. That's when things started to feel off. When I came out of work that first day, I saw my wife, Gabby, laughing and talking with Daryl and another coworker, a woman from the office I'll call Brianna. After introducing her as my wife, we had some small talk before heading home. Looking back, I think that's where everything might have started. That week, when Gabby came to pick me up from work, I noticed she began spending time with Daryl and Brianna. I'd sometimes see them in the office, hanging out and listening to rap music on Daryl's Beats headphones, which were connected to his phone. Gabby told me she liked talking to Brianna and enjoyed hanging out with her. Since Brianna and Daryl lived close to each other and were good friends, I didn't think much of it at the time. Gabby visiting the office to talk to Brianna, and occasionally Daryl, seemed harmless. Gabby gets a lot of attention, especially on Instagram, so I've always tried to keep my insecurities in check. Even when I saw her talking to Daryl without Brianna around, I convinced myself not to jump to conclusions. If I brought up my suspicions, it would only upset Gabby, and we'd end up arguing in Spanish every day. But last Wednesday, everything changed, and my fears about Gabby possibly cheating on me hit me like a ton of bricks. That day, as I was leaving work, I said goodbye to a friend who was on the phone. He responded, and then told the person on the other end that it was me. His tone made me curious because it sounded like the person on the phone knew me. I asked who he was talking to, and he smiled, saying it was an old coworker of ours. Handing me the phone, he said the person wanted to say hi. It turned out to be Tyrell, an old coworker who'd left a while back. We caught up, and he explained he'd moved to Atlanta to work with his brother in a warehouse. He even joked about how he was making more money now. After chatting, he asked me to send him my phone number on Facebook so we could talk later. I agreed, sent him my number, and handed the phone back to my friend. Before I even made it to my car, Tyrell called me. I picked up, and he immediately asked if I was driving. When I said no, he told me not to start yet because he had something important to tell me. His tone was strange, and it made me nervous. I asked what he meant, and he insisted I couldn't tell anyone what he was about to say. Hesitantly, I agreed. He started asking me if Gabby still came to my job, and if Daryl was still talking to her. His questions sent a wave of anxiety through me. I told him yes to both, and he dropped the bombshell. I think Daryl banged your wife. Hearing those words sent chills down my spine. I asked Tyrell how he knew this, and he explained that back when he worked with us, he often saw Gabby and Daryl talking. According to him, Daryl would brag to other coworkers about how badly he wanted to sleep with Gabby. Tyrell claimed Daryl frequently made comments about her figure, especially about her butt. I asked Tyrell when he had seen Gabby and Daryl together, and he said it was usually about an hour before lunch. He mentioned that while Gabby sometimes talked to Brianna, he noticed her talking to Daryl more frequently. Tyrell explained that, initially, it seemed like harmless flirting, but things started to feel off when Gabby began visiting the office on Saturdays when Daryl's department was working overtime. This shocked me because I rarely worked overtime, so I couldn't understand why she would be there. I asked Tyrell if he was sure about this, and he insisted he was. He said that during one of her Saturday visits, Daryl's department had a lot of downtime, and Daryl would play music through his Beat speaker. Tyrell said that at some point, he heard loud Spanish music and noticed things getting inappropriate between Gabby and Daryl. Tyrell described seeing Daryl grab Gabby by the neck while she twerked for him. He said she seemed to be enjoying herself, laughing and putting on a show as if she were in some kind of contest. Tyrell added that Daryl even lifted Gabby's shirt to reveal her leggings. When I asked if Gabby tried to stop him, Tyrell said no. She just kept laughing and dancing. Tyrell emphasized that everyone in the room saw it happen. Hearing this, I felt frozen. I asked Tyrell again if he was absolutely sure, and he firmly confirmed it, saying he wasn't blind. He advised me to keep Gabby away from Daryl and Brianna altogether. I thanked him for telling me but hung up feeling humiliated. My thoughts raced as I drove home, consumed with rage and sadness. What Tyrell described happened 7 or 8 months ago, and the thought of what might have happened since then was unbearable. Had she taken things further with Daryl? When I got home, Gabby was on the phone with her mom. After some small talk, I asked her if she had seen Brianna that day, and she said yes. I followed up by asking if she had seen Daryl, too, but she said no. Her answer surprised me because, from what I'd seen, they acted like the Three Musketeers. Gabby brushed it off, saying Daryl wasn't around much, and claimed it was mostly just her and Brianna, which I knew wasn't true. Then, without another word, she walked past me into the kitchen and started texting on her phone. Her response left me feeling deeply hurt. It was obvious to me she was lying about her relationship with Daryl. I stood there, watching her prepare dinner for our kids, overwhelmed by sadness, anger, and frustration. Right now, I'm stuck. I feel a mix of rage and heartbreak, unsure of what to do. I need proof of what's really going on, but gathering it is going to be difficult since it involves people at my workplace. I can't risk my job, and Tyrell's account of the twerking incident, while troubling, isn't solid enough for legal action or divorce. Gabby could easily explain it away, and Daryl would just deny everything. I'm assuming the worst, that Gabby cheated on me, but I need evidence to confirm it. Without proof, I risk losing everything in a divorce, and her family will undoubtedly come after me. I have to tread carefully, but I'm determined to find out the truth. Things have taken a turn for the worse, and I'm increasingly convinced that my coworker may have had an affair with my wife, Gabby. To provide some background, my car needed brake repairs, so Gabby had been picking me up from work. During these visits, she befriended Brianna, who works in the front office, and Daryl, a coworker from the shipping department. Over time, Gabby began visiting my workplace on her days off to hang out with them during lunch. A couple of weeks ago, I got a devastating call from an old coworker, Tyrell. He told me that Daryl might have gotten too close to Gabby. Tyrell said he'd noticed them talking privately, and it looked like they were flirting. This often happened just before Daryl's lunch break, which Tyrell found suspicious. He also mentioned that on Saturdays, when Daryl worked overtime, Gabby would come by, which raised even more red flags. Tyrell said he initially didn't want to tell me anything, but one Saturday, he witnessed something that made him reconsider. He explained that he heard Spanish music playing in the shipping dock and decided to check it out. That's when he saw Gabby twerking for Daryl. According to Tyrell, things quickly got more physical. Daryl grabbed her by the neck and lifted her shirt to expose her butt. Tyrell said it started as playful, but the way they looked at each other showed it was becoming something more serious. I tried to deny it at first, asking Tyrell if he was sure it was Gabby. He confirmed it, pointing out her distinct tattoos and hairstyle. I was stunned and humiliated. What hurt even more was that this incident happened 8 or 9 months ago. Who knows what's been going on since then? While I appreciate Tyrell finally telling me, I can't help but feel it's too late. If he'd told me sooner, I might have been able to address this before things escalated. When I got home, I asked Gabby about her relationship with Daryl. She downplayed it. saying she only occasionally talked to him and mostly hung out with Brianna. I knew she was lying, especially after everything Tyrell told me, and it became clear she was using Brianna as a cover to see Daryl. Since that conversation, I've started paying more attention to Gabby's behavior. She's always on her phone, which has a passcode I can't figure out. Late at night, she goes out on the back porch to take calls, and I've started eavesdropping. The snippets of conversation I've overheard make it seem like she's talking to Daryl. She said things like, "Stop, you're crazy," or mention fun they had at a club. Once, I even heard her say, "I can't go over there," which made me think she was referring to his house. When I confronted her about who she was talking to, she claimed it was her sister or Brianna, but her giggling and whispering told a different story. Since Tyrell's call, the red flags have been glaringly obvious. Gabby barely talks to me anymore, always claims to be busy, and has refused to be intimate. When I tried to initiate, she laughed it off, saying she didn't want it with the kids in the house. The last straw came last Saturday. After work, Gabby called to tell me she had plans to go out again and that I'd need to cook dinner for the kids. It felt like she was angry at me for unknowingly disrupting her plans, likely involving Daryl. Looking back, I can't believe I ever thought this was normal. All the signs are pointing to infidelity, but I need undeniable proof before taking any action. This is eating me alive, and I don't know how much longer I can endure this situation. When I saw Gabby all dressed up and heading out, I immediately suspected she was planning to meet Daryl. I lied, telling her I had errands to run before coming home, even though I knew she was already getting ready to leave. I told her to ask her sister to watch the kids, knowing full well that wasn't an option. She tried to guilt me into staying home so she could go out, but I stood my ground, saying I had the right to go out and do things too and might not be back for a while. Frustrated, she snapped, "Whatever," and hung up on me. Later that night, Gabby was clearly irritated. When I said just a couple of words to her, she blew up, accusing me of ruining her plans. I told her I didn't care and that my errands were more important than her hanging out. She countered, saying I never mentioned errands, to which I pointed out she hadn't told me anything about her plans either. When I asked who she was planning to meet, she just brushed me off, saying to forget it. Later that evening, I noticed Gabby on the porch, talking on her phone. Judging by her irritated tone, I assumed she was complaining about me. A few days later, things escalated. After I got home from work one night, Gabby had cooked dinner and came into the bedroom to tell me it was ready. As I entered the dining room, I saw her all dressed up again, clearly preparing to leave. When I asked where she was going, she vaguely said she was going out with friends and told me I had to watch the kids. I pressed her for specifics, but she accused me of trying to control her before storming out with an attitude. That night, Gabby didn't come back until 2:30 a.m. I was furious. I had been texting her, but the only response I got was, "Please stop texting me." When she finally came in, I was playing on our son's PlayStation, still stewing over her behavior. When I confronted her, asking why she was so late, she dismissed me, saying she was out with friends. I wasn't buying it. I told her it was disrespectful to come home so late, especially without a valid explanation. She snapped back, accusing me of being controlling, and said I never had an issue with her staying out late before. Our argument got loud enough that our son came out, worried about what was going on. Gabby used that as an excuse to end the argument and stormed into the bedroom. I let our son play the game for a little while before sending him back to bed, but I couldn't let the issue rest. After calming down, I went to the bedroom to continue the conversation. When I walked in, I stopped mid-sentence. Gabby was getting undressed, and I couldn't help but notice she was wearing a black string as underwear, something she never wore for me. It felt like a slap in the face. She froze when she saw me, her expression shifting between surprise and defiance, as if daring me to ask her about it. Without a word, she grabbed her pajamas off the bed and went into the bathroom to change, leaving me standing there, feeling humiliated and betrayed. I couldn't believe what I had just seen. It stopped me in my tracks and left me crushed. I decided I'd be sleeping on the couch because things would be way too awkward after that. My mind was racing, unable to process what I just witnessed. Gabby had never worn anything like that before, practically her bare bottom with just a black string. To be fair, she does own sexy underwear, but it's been ages since she wore them. When we go on vacation, she likes wearing bikinis to post on Instagram, but even those weren't as revealing as what I saw. The string she was wearing was more like something you'd see on World Star. At this point, her behavior was screaming suspicious and secretive. After reading advice online, I decided to act. I ordered a voice-activated recorder and planned to place it in her car. To avoid her seeing the package and asking questions, I had it delivered to a friend's address. Thankfully, He agreed without hesitation. Once it arrives, I'll pick it up and get to the bottom of all this. I'm ready to blow this thing wide open, no matter the cost. Thanks to Tyrell, my suspicions are now centered on the money. Today, my wife forced my hand. For context, Gabby broke her vows, and here's how it all started. Last year, my car broke down, and Gabby had to pick me up from work. While waiting, she became friends with two coworkers, Brianna, who works in the office, and Daryl. They'd chat and listen to rap music while waiting for my shift to end. Even after my car was fixed, Gabby started coming by on her lunch breaks when she wasn't working with her sister. Recently, an old friend and former coworker, Tyrell, called me with shocking news. He told me that Gabby and Daryl had been meeting up secretly and acting inappropriately. He said Gabby would visit Daryl on Saturdays when they worked overtime. Tyrell described how he once saw her twerking for Daryl in the back while music played. Daryl even lifted her shirt to see her butt and grabbed her by the neck. Tyrell suspected they might have gone further than that. Thanks to Gabby's tattoos, her usual ponytail, and the fact that she's Spanish, Tyrell had no trouble identifying her. He also mentioned she would bring Daryl lunch and hang out with him during downtime on Saturdays. Since I never work overtime, I had no idea this was happening. When I confronted Gabby about her friendship with Daryl, she outright lied, claiming they weren't close. This infuriated me because it was a blatant lie. Everyone at work saw them hanging out during lunch. After that, I started snooping to see what I could uncover, and the red flags were everywhere. Gabby would stay out all night, claiming she was with friends. She'd talk on the phone on the back porch, giggling and saying things like, "You're crazy," or "I can't come over tonight." She'd also leave the house suddenly without saying where she was going. Everything pointed to something being seriously wrong, and I knew I had to find out the truth. When I asked Gabby who she was talking to on the phone, she would usually say it was her sister or Brianna. Being at work had started feeling awkward too, especially after Tyrell's call, because I realized how nice everyone was to me, while they knew more than I did. Tyrell's information was like a master key, opening my eyes to what was happening behind my back. Gabby and Daryl had no idea that I knew about them. My only regret was that this information was 8 months old, and so much had likely happened since then. I had been so focused on work and raising our kids that I failed to notice the changes in Gabby. Tyrell showed me how blind I'd been, wearing rose-tinted glasses while Gabby used her friendship with Brianna as a front to see Daryl. Over the last 8 months, Gabby had become much more secretive. She barely talked to me, only speaking when absolutely necessary, and most of her conversations were with her friends. She started dressing up more often, and after staying out until 2 in the morning one night, I noticed she was wearing a black string thong. It concerned me because she never wore underwear like that. She usually reserved sexy bikinis for Instagram posts during vacations, but this was something different. This was meant for someone else. Seeing her like that froze me in my tracks. I couldn't even argue. I just walked out of the room. Tyrell's revelations had turned my world upside down, and the writing was clearly on the wall. Before his call, I had always tried not to be the jealous type. Gabby is beautiful, and she gets plenty of attention on Instagram. Her photos, even old ones, get likes and comments, many of which are inappropriate. It wasn't easy being a husband to someone with thousands of guys following her online, but I always tried to be understanding. I thought once we got married, this sort of thing would change. I decided to buy a voice-activated recorder to get proof of what was going on. If my suspicions were true, I was prepared to divorce her. After I got the recorder, I thought I'd try to talk to Gabby to see if we could fix things. I rode with her to the supermarket to bring up the issue. I told her that while going out with friends was fine, she still had responsibilities as a parent. She accused me of being controlling and said she had the right to have fun and not spend all her time at home or working. I told her I understood she wanted to have fun, but that her sudden outings without explanation were concerning. Surprisingly, Gabby agreed to be more mindful of her responsibilities and my feelings. For a while, it seemed like we were making progress, and I thought we could work on our marriage. But a couple of days later, Daryl called her, and everything unraveled again. Earlier this week, Gabby told me the kids wanted to watch a Pixar movie with their older cousins on Saturday. She said she planned to take them to watch the movie together. I thought it was a great idea and was happy she was spending more time with the kids. However, a couple of hours after they left, my nephew called me. He mentioned he'd heard we had a particular video game he wanted to play and asked if he could come over after the movie. I told him it was fine if Gabby was willing to bring him back home. What he said next completely threw me off. He told me Gabby had dropped them off at the movie and wasn't staying to watch it with them. I was confused because Gabby had specifically told me she'd watch the movie with the kids. That's when I remembered. It was Saturday, The same day Tyrell said Gabby would meet Daryl during overtime. It was all making sense, and her lie confirmed my suspicions. Noticing the time, I realized that if anyone was working overtime on a Saturday, they'd still be there. I called my wife, Gabby, but she didn't pick up, which infuriated me. Determined to get answers, I called my job and asked for security. When I spoke to the lady there, she confirmed that the guys were still working. I hung up, now seething with anger, wondering if Gabby was actually with Daryl. I got into my car and drove to my workplace, furious and determined to get to the truth. On the way, all I could think about was the betrayal and how ridiculous this situation had become. I'd already spoken to Gabby about this before, thinking she understood how serious I was. But this time, I wasn't going to let it slide. If Daryl was sleeping with my wife, I was done. When I arrived at the parking lot, I immediately spotted Gabby's car. My anger intensified. I stormed into the building and headed straight for the shipping dock where Daryl worked. As I entered, his crew jumped up, clearly surprised to see me. They looked like they were about to leave, but my presence halted them. I scanned the area and didn't see Daryl or Gabby, which meant they were likely in the trucker's lounge. I made my way to the lounge, but one of the crew members tried to stop me, saying I didn't belong there. I warned him to back off or face the consequences, and it was clear he didn't want to challenge me. Not wasting more time, I pushed past and headed to the lounge. The trucker's lounge was a small, mostly unused room with broken vending machines. I knew I'd find them there, and as I got closer, I heard Daryl groaning. My suspicions were confirmed. Hugging the wall, I peered inside and couldn't believe what I saw. Daryl was sitting on a couch, his shirt open, pants and underwear down, while Gabby was on her knees in front of him. She was servicing him, completely engrossed. Daryl looked down at her like he owned her. It was a disgusting scene, one I never imagined I'd witness. I pulled out my phone, knowing I'd need proof. My hands shook as I recorded at least 7 seconds of their betrayal. Then, I burst into the room, screaming, "Screw you, bitch." Daryl looked stunned, but Gabby's reaction shocked me more. She didn't even seem embarrassed. Instead, she looked annoyed, as if I was inconveniencing her. Still holding Daryl, she glared at me and snapped, "What are you doing here?" Her casual attitude infuriated me. I yelled, "Screw you, bitch. This is how you treat me." Gabby sighed, covering her face, muttering, "Oh my God." She wasn't ashamed of what she was doing, just embarrassed about my reaction. I called her every name I could think of, my rage boiling over, but all she did was roll her eyes and say, "Can you please just leave?" Her indifference, as if our marriage didn't matter, cut deeper than anything. She didn't care that she'd been caught, didn't care that she was destroying our family. All she wanted was for me to leave, so she could continue whatever it was with Daryl. Her complete disregard for me, for our marriage, left me stunned and even angrier. I couldn't believe this was the woman I married, the mother of my children. All I could do was yell, "How could you do this to me?" After claiming she loved me, Gabby finally blurted out, "I don't love you like that, okay?" Hearing those words almost knocked the wind out of me. She told me again, in a frustrated tone, to just leave. I told her I wanted a divorce, and her only response was a flat, "Okay." That was it. No apology, no regret, just indifference. I left the warehouse, got in my car, and drove home, absolutely furious. Once I got home, I couldn't contain my rage. I punched the walls and cursed at the top of my lungs. How could she do this to me? How could the woman I thought I knew become someone so unrecognizable? I realized I was completely done with the toxic situation she had dragged me into. As of now, she still hasn't come back, and I assume she's staying with her sister. She'll have to explain the situation to her family, but at this point, I don't care. Whatever comes next, I have undeniable evidence of her infidelity, and I plan to use it to my advantage during the divorce. It's clear now that Gabby was never in love with me. She loved the lifestyle and the things I did for her. Looking back, the signs were there. I just didn't want to see them. Gabby didn't want a real partnership. She wanted to be desired, and when Daryl came along, showing her that attention, she betrayed everything we had. Relationships like that never last, because people like Gabby eventually reveal who they really are. To prepare myself for what was ahead, I bought a voice-activated recorder, though I only needed to use it once. That's all it took to confirm what Tyrell had warned me about. All I had to do was wait for the right opportunity to uncover the truth. That opportunity came last Saturday when Gabby claimed she was going to watch a Pixar movie with our kids and their older cousins. Initially, I believed her, but then my nephew, who was at the movies, called to let me know that Gabby planned to pick them up afterward. That caught me off guard because she had specifically said she would be watching the movie with them. After hanging up, it didn't take long to piece things together. Tyrell had previously mentioned that Gabby often visited Daryl at work during overtime shifts, the same shifts where she had been seen twerking for him months ago. Deciding to confirm my suspicions, I drove to her workplace. When I arrived, her car was in the parking lot, confirming my fears. I headed into the building, making my way toward the small trucker's lounge where I suspected they might be. Peeking inside, I saw Gabby on all fours, with Daryl holding her head in his lap. It was a painful and infuriating moment, but I knew I needed evidence. I took out my phone, recorded about 7 seconds of the scene, and then stormed in to confront them. I unleashed a level of anger I didn't know I was capable of. It hurt even more when Gabby seemed more annoyed than remorseful about being caught. Daryl looked shocked, but Gabby had the nerve to ask me to leave. That sent me over the edge. I demanded to know how she could do something like this, and she coldly responded, "I don't love you like that," before telling me to leave again. Hearing that almost made me faint. I left in a haze of rage and heartbreak, driving back home while trying to process everything. After venting my anger at the situation, I eventually calmed down and faced the harsh truth. Our marriage was over. Gabby didn't love me, not as a partner or a husband. Looking back, I realized who Gabby really was. She wanted to feel entitled in the relationship, and I unknowingly enabled that by trying to keep her happy at any cost. She had convinced me that being a good husband meant catering to her every need. I thought I was lucky to have her because she presented herself as a trophy wife, always seeking attention and validation from others. Her obsession with social media only made things worse. With countless followers, mostly men, and flirtatious comments on her posts, I had to develop thick skin just to cope. Whether it was bikini pictures from our trips to Vegas or Jamaica or her everyday selfies, she craved attention. It didn't matter that I was devoted to her. She would always chase the next source of validation. Now that it's over, I've accepted the reality of who she is and that our marriage was doomed from the start. I knew it was time to tell my family everything. The first person I called was my older brother, Ricky. When he answered, I let it all out, ranting about what had happened, laced with as many curse words as I could remember. After I told my brother I was at home, he said he had to run a quick errand but would stop by afterward. I then called my younger sister to break the news to her. She gave me a lecture, but she also mentioned that Ricky had called her and was already aware of the situation. She said she would check on me later and hung up. Not long after, she called back to tell me that Ricky was coming to pick me up and suggested I go with him. She asked where the kids were, and I told her they were at the movies with Gabby, supposed to pick them up afterward. She wasn't thrilled about the kids being with her, but in my state of mind, I figured there wasn't much we could do at that moment. After hanging up, I started to drift off to sleep, only to hear Ricky's car pull up. When I opened the door, I saw Ricky walking toward me, carrying a bag in his toolbox. Ricky's presence was always intimidating. He had played football in high school and college, and with his bald head and beard, he looked like he came straight from the military. He walked up to me, gave me a big hug, and even though we always played it tough with our feelings, I couldn't help but tear up. We both knew this was what I needed. After the hug, he told me he stopped at the store and bought new locks for the house. He said the last thing I needed was to leave and have Gabby come back to take everything. After about an hour of talking and changing the locks, we headed to Ricky's house. He and his girlfriend did everything they could to cheer me up over the weekend. My sister Gina also came over to offer support. Even with my family's encouragement, I couldn't shake the images of what I had witnessed. I kept hoping Gabby would confess, but after what I saw, I couldn't stop thinking about revenge. Payback was burning inside me, and I wasn't finished with this yet. Then, on Sunday, Gabby's sister, Christina, called me. At first, Ricky didn't want me to answer, but I reminded him that my kids were with her, so I took the call. Christina asked what was going on, saying Gabby wouldn't come back to the house but wouldn't say why. I told her the truth. I had caught Gabby cheating at my job. There was a moment of silence before she started denying it, claiming I was lying about her sister. After letting her rant for a bit, I told her to hang up and that I would send her the proof. She tried to say something, but I angrily ended the call. I immediately sent her the video and didn't hear from her the rest of the day. The next day, Monday, I went to work and spoke with my supervisor about Daryl and Gabby. To my surprise, he gave me a testimony form to file a formal complaint. While I was filling it out, he expressed his sympathy and asked if I was sure about what was happening. I angrily replied that I was sure and even asked if he wanted to see the video I had. He was taken aback and asked if I truly had evidence. When I confirmed that I did, he took the form back from me, saying it wasn't needed anymore. He then picked up the phone and called someone to report the situation. After hanging up, He told me that he had contacted the manager and asked me to send the video to his email so he could handle it from there. When the boss was scheduled to visit the facility in a couple of days, I told him I wouldn't be coming into work during that time, and he said he was just about to suggest that anyway. Then, Gabby's sister Christina finally called me back, and I was surprised when she said she had spoken with Gabby. Christina wanted me to talk to Gabby that night because the kids wanted to come home. I told her I'd take the kids, but I didn't want to talk to Gabby because there was nothing left to say. Christina said she knew Gabby had messed up, but insisted that I should be the reasonable one and think about the family. I felt like I was being unreasonable, but I stuck to my stance. I told Christina I wasn't going to talk to Gabby because she had cheated with my coworker and embarrassed me at work. I also mentioned that Gabby had brought another man into my house, and I was supposed to just forget everything that happened. Christina argued that it wasn't true, and that Gabby only messed around with him at the job or his place. I scoffed and said, "How do I know that? For all I know, she could have slept with Daryl's crew too when she was there." Christina got mad and denied that, and I demanded to know what really happened. That's when Christina told me everything Gabby had confided in her, and honestly, I regretted asking because I knew Gabby wouldn't lie to Christina, which made it even worse. According to Christina, when Gabby first met Brianna, Daryl was talking to her, and Gabby told him she was there to pick me up. While they waited, Daryl and Brianna started talking, and whenever Gabby came in, they'd hang out while waiting for me to come out. Over time, Gabby and Brianna became friends, and Gabby liked spending time with them during lunch. Christina said that after a while, Daryl began complimenting Gabby, especially about her body, which surprised her, but she liked the attention. One day, she messed up and told Brianna she found Daryl attractive, and Brianna ended up telling him what Gabby had said. From then on, Daryl got too close and started making inappropriate comments. Gabby played it off, but she admitted to Christina that she liked the attention and kept thinking about it. I scoffed again, asking why Gabby didn't just tell me about it so I could put a stop to it. Christina said she didn't want it because she really liked Daryl and how wild he was acting. I asked her when all of this started, and Christina hesitated at first, but when I threatened to hang up, she told me. She said Gabby told her about a birthday party Brianna's sister was having. I knew about Brianna's sister and how she always found excuses to get drunk. Gabby went to the party with Brianna, and according to Christina, Daryl was there too. Gabby was surprised to see him, but they ended up hanging out and having fun. Christina asked Gabby if Daryl was trying to get with her, and Gabby confirmed that he was. She said Daryl started dancing with her, but eventually, things became more aggressive between them. When I asked what she meant by aggressive, Christina said Daryl had asked Gabby to twerk for him. Christina said Gabby turned around and started twerking on Daryl. She mentioned that in the tight leggings Gabby was wearing, it was obvious Daryl was enjoying the way she was grinding on him. After a while, Daryl started kissing her, and they ended up making out. Christina said that after that, they would go out together, and things started to escalate. When I asked what she meant by escalating, the red flags really began to add up. Christina explained that when Gabby went to hang out at Daryl's apartment with Brianna, Daryl couldn't keep his hands off her, and Gabby allowed it. Brianna, seeing what was happening, left them alone in the apartment. Christina said that after they made out, Daryl went down on Gabby. After that, he kept trying to do the same thing, and sometimes Gabby would stop him, but eventually, she didn't. Christina said that at one point, Gabby started returning the favor. I asked Christina if Gabby did that while my kids were around, and she assured me it all happened either at the job or at Daryl's apartment. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and Christina expressed her disbelief too. She said that Gabby admitted Daryl knew exactly what to do and that she loved how wild he was. Gabby thought going down on her would be the extent of it, but Daryl wanted more. Christina said that one day, Daryl turned her around and pinned her against the couch. She told Gabby she should have run at that point, but Gabby couldn't bring herself to do it. She allowed the situation to go further, and Daryl took her from behind. I was stunned, and I had to ask how Gabby could do this to me. Christina said Gabby found the whole situation exciting, and the fact that it was wrong made it even more thrilling. She also said Gabby liked how rebellious Daryl was, and when he finally got her, he didn't disappoint. Christina mentioned that Daryl was so eager that Gabby thought the neighbors might have heard them. I could relate to that because when my brother and I helped our aunt move out of her apartment, we heard what sounded like explosions and machine gun fire coming from the apartment below us. We later realized someone was watching an action movie, and the walls were so thin it was like we were living in an action film. If Daryl's apartment was anything like that, I could easily imagine the neighbors hearing everything if Daryl was being as aggressive as Christina described. Christina said that from then on, whenever Daryl wanted it, he got it until Tyrell found out. It was supposed to be their secret, but Tyrell turned out to be more of a man than they thought. Christina was about to continue, but I told her that the party and apartment situation was enough. She asked if I was going to be the reasonable one again and talk to Gabby, but I told her no. I said I was going to come over the next day to get the kids, but I had nothing to say to Gabby. Christina insisted that if we both acted stubborn, it wouldn't work, but I told her Gabby made a fool of me, and I would never give her that chance again. I told Christina when I'd be coming to pick up the kids, and she groaned before hanging up in frustration. I felt pretty low after that, and it took me a while to regain my composure. A few hours later, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize, followed by a text. It turned out to be a coworker I knew, and I was surprised to hear from him. I was driving at the time, so I answered via Bluetooth. He asked what was going on, and I told him I was just running errands. He then asked if I had anything to do with Daryl getting fired, which took me completely by surprise. He explained that 2 men and a woman in suits had arrived with her supervisor, and they went straight to the back where the truckers' lounge was. From this, I figured they must have been checking the lounge for video footage. About 20 minutes later, Daryl was called to the office and told to pack up his things. I admitted to my involvement, and he said he would have done the same thing. He asked when I was coming back, and I told him I'd work a half day on Friday. He said okay, and we ended the call. I was relieved and decided to treat myself to a nice dinner that night. The next day was when I had to pick up the kids, and I dreaded it. It had been days since I'd seen Gabby, and my brother Ricky came with me for support. When I got there, the kids were excited to see me and immediately told me their mother had been mean to them and ignoring them, so they were ready to come home. I saw Gabby in the kitchen, talking on her phone and completely ignoring me. I told the kids to go ahead and get in the car, and my oldest daughter asked if she could bring her iPad with her. Gabby snapped and said no, insisting it had to stay with her. I told her it was fine and I'd take responsibility for it, but Gabby refused. She said she bought it, so it stayed with her until they came back. My daughter was getting upset, so I told her to wait in the car. As she walked out, I couldn't believe Gabby was being so petty. That's when a huge argument broke out. I didn't hold back this time. I called her a hoe, and she shot back, calling me a snitch for getting Daryl fired. She said she didn't know Daryl like that, and I told her she could have said no. She responded with a screw you, go cry to my mama, and said I was lucky she didn't look my way. She told me I should have fought Daryl instead of getting him fired. I said that real women don't get that luxury, and I wasn't going to fight over a thoughtless woman. Then, she called me dusty and lame, saying she didn't love a lame guy. I got so angry I grabbed a glass of orange juice and threw it at her. She barely dodged it, looking at me in shock, and then threw a fork at my head, though she missed. The fight escalated until my brother, Christina, and Christina's friend intervened. Gabby yelled that she didn't need me and kept shouting next. My brother practically had to pick me up and pull me onto the porch to calm me down. After I cooled off, I left because I was exhausted and didn't have the energy to fight anymore. Once I got back in the car, I told my daughter that her mother had taken the iPad, but she didn't care anymore. She just wanted to leave. I couldn't believe everything I had just gone through. Even though I had overreacted, it felt good to finally curse Gabby out. Right now, my kids are with me, and with the new locks on the door, it's going to stay that way. I had to break the news to the kids in a way they could understand that their mother and I won't be living together anymore. They were crushed but understood. As I've said before, the only thing on my mind now is the divorce and getting the lawyers involved. The video could play a big role in helping with the arguments, and I'm hoping it will make a difference. My wife is clearly full of herself, and if she thinks she's going to have some meaningful relationship with Daryl, she's delusional. Daryl, or anyone else for that matter, won't stick around for her. She's approaching 40, with kids, and Daryl isn't interested in being the world's greatest stepdad, despite what she might think. I know Daryl better than she does. He's just using her for a fling. Once he's done, he'll move on to the next one, and that reality will hit her sooner than she thinks. I bet it won't even take a year. At least now I have some peace of mind, but I still have to worry about my kids and my real family. Maybe even Christina, if she ever sees through Gabby's nonsense. After everything that happened, it feels like I've finally gotten my life back on track. The divorce is finalized, and though it was a rough road, I can finally breathe again. My kids are with me now, and we've created a new rhythm to our lives, one that's filled with laughter, love, and peace. The house feels like a home again, and I no longer feel that constant weight of uncertainty hanging over me. It was hard breaking the news to my kids, but they understood. They were crushed at first, but I could see in their eyes that they trusted me, and that meant everything. They needed stability, and I promised to be the father they deserved. That became my focus, just being there for them, showing them that no matter what happened with Gabby or anyone else, I'd always be their rock. It took time, but I've started to find myself again. The pain of betrayal has lessened, and in its place, a stronger version of me has emerged. I've surrounded myself with real people. Ricky, my brother, who's been by my side through it all, and even Christina, who had the courage to distance herself from Gabby. She's apologized, and though I didn't expect that, it showed me that not everyone I cared about was lost in the mess. I can't lie, there were days when I wondered if I'd ever find peace. But now, as I watch my kids play in the yard, hear them laughing over dinner, or see them excited about the smallest things, I know I made the right choice. Life might not have gone the way I planned, but it's turned into something better. I've also realized that I'm ready to let love in again. But this time, it's different. I'm not rushing anything, and I'm not settling for less than I deserve. I met someone recently. She's kind, patient, and just gets me. We enjoy simple moments together, whether it's a quiet evening at home or a walk through the park. It feels right, and I'm not in a rush. She doesn't bring drama into my life. She just brings peace, and I can feel my heart slowly opening up to that. I know I've been through a lot, and I'm not naive enough to think it's all smooth sailing from here. But what I've learned is that I'm stronger than I ever gave myself credit for. The past doesn't define me, it's just a part of my story. And right now, I'm writing the next chapter, one filled with love, laughter, and the promise of better days ahead. I've found peace, not only in my home but in myself. And with my kids by my side, I know that the best is yet to come. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
The signs were prepared and positioned near the front entrance, having spent the majority of the last couple of days perfecting them. Now came the challenging part. Ascending the stairs into the master bedroom, I swiftly stripped the bed, maneuvered the mattress off the queen-sized frame, and half lifted, half slid it downstairs, through the hallway, out the front door, and onto the lawn adjacent to the street. Returning inside, I hurled the slats and bedclothes downstairs, following them outside and adding them to the pile beside the mattress. After another trip upstairs, I dismantled the side rails and swiftly transported them outside. Glancing at my watch, I noted it was 4:22. Time was of the essence. I needed to finish by 5. Reassembling the bed took until 4:35. Next up was the kitchen table, light enough for me to handle alone. I angled it sideways through the door and placed it beside the bed in the yard. The last item was the 6x8 throw rug in the living room. After rolling it up, I joined it with the other items in the yard, erected the signs, and proudly observed the time. 4:55. Just 10 minutes until my wife's return. Stepping into the middle of the street, I surveyed my handiwork. It was a sight to behold, almost bringing a tear to my eye. Our marriage bed, the kitchen table, and throw rug, 3 places I knew had been used by my wife and her lover repeatedly over the past 6 months. The signs, perfectly placed and out of reach, completed the scene. I approached each piece of furniture and read aloud the large sign in front of it. These items are yours for the taking, free. They are no longer wanted in this house. If you are able to stomach the stench of infidelity and broken vows, help yourself. The sign above the bed detailed my wife's infidelity, specifying her regular liaisons with her lover over the past 6 months. Above the kitchen table, another sign recounted their activities, typically just before she served me dinner. On the throw rug, a sign indicated their preference for that spot. Each sign was adorned with a 17 by 24-inch photo of the adulterous couple in the act. Behind the table, a 5th sign revealed the identity of my wife's lover, Greg Allen, her boss at Mitchell Price, and Allen Realty. Married with 3 children, he was unaware of his wife's actions, but not for long. The time was 4:57, just in time. She would be home any minute. As I turned to assess the gathering crowd of neighbors and the increasing number of halted cars, some onlookers phoned friends or the police. I nonchalantly acknowledged the gathering and retreated into the house, closing the door behind me. Precisely at 5 p.m., my wife's car rounded the corner. Observing the commotion near our house, she slowed down, her gaze fixed on the spectacle unfolding on our lawn. I imagined her focusing on the furniture and signs, particularly the large photos of her and Greg Allen engaged in their illicit activities, their expressions captured in moments of lust and pleasure. Even with her car window between us, amidst the crowd of 40 or 50 onlookers, I still heard her desperate cry. "No, Oh God, no. Finally, her gaze shifted from the signs to the front window of our house, where she spotted me standing. We locked eyes. She appeared devastated, her complexion drained. Tears streamed down her cheeks. It seemed as if she was questioning me, mirroring my own bewilderment. I observed her for a moment before turning away, drawing the curtain shut behind me. Perhaps now is the time to recount how my wife, Sherry, and I ended up in this tragic situation. My name is Jack Meyer. I met Sherry during our junior year of college, introduced by a mutual friend. Instantly, I was captivated. Sherry wasn't conventionally beautiful, but she possessed an irresistible charm. Standing at 5'2" with striking blue eyes and shoulder-length blonde hair, she had a petite, yet perfectly proportioned figure that enchanted me. From that moment, I was smitten, never doubting my ability to win her heart. Sherry and I began dating, quickly becoming inseparable. Within a month, we shared our first closeness moment, an experience unlike any other. I was consumed by my love for Sherry, unable to get enough of her. Though we were not maidens, our passion for each other was all-consuming. Every moment together was blissful, every touch electric. Our love deepened over the years. After graduating, we married and settled into our first home, a condo in Van Nuys. Sherry pursued a career in real estate while I found work in electronic manufacturing. We built a life together that I believed to be perfect. For the next 13 years, we shared an idyllic existence. First in our condo and later in our dream home as our finances improved. We welcomed our children, Shelby, now 8, and Ryan, now 6, whom we adored beyond measure. Our family was our world. So, what went wrong? I wish I had the answers. I wish I had noticed the subtle signs indicating something was amiss. But I was oblivious, living in a bubble of love and trust. It took an unexpected event, our daughter Shelby falling ill at school, to uncover the truth. It was a Thursday when I received the call from the school nurse just before noon, informing me of Shelby's illness. In the midst of a staff meeting, I asked the nurse to contact my wife. Despite attempts to reach her at her office and on her cell, she was unreachable. So, the nurse called me. Recognizing the urgency of fetching my daughter, I apologized to my staff and hurried to Shelby's school to retrieve her. Upon reaching home, upon opening the garage, I was startled by an unfamiliar car parked in my spot beside my wife's. Instantly, a lump formed in my throat, and my stomach churned. No, it couldn't be, I reassured myself. My wife, the woman I cherished above all else, couldn't possibly be having an affair. But why was there a strange car in the garage with the door closed? Something was amiss, and I needed answers. I couldn't expose my daughter to this uncertainty. I instructed Shelby to stay in the car for a moment, explaining that the exterminator was spraying for bugs, and the fumes could make her feel worse. It was the first time I had ever lied to her. Shelby complained about being tired and wanting to go inside, but I reassured her that I would check first before coming to get her. Later, Shelby asked me what was going on, and I reassured her that everything was fine, attributing my discomfort to the odor in the house. I left Shelby with her grandmother, promising to return for her in a couple of hours. I didn't disclose what I had witnessed, simply asking my mom to care for Shelby until I returned from work. Though tempted to return home and confront the cheating duo, I realized I needed more than a mere confrontation. I craved revenge. As I drove back to my office, I began devising plans that would bring ruin upon my wife and her boss indefinitely. The electronics firm where I worked had multiple divisions. As a senior engineer in the medical equipment division, we shared a large complex with another division specializing in commercial security equipment. Upon reaching my office, I instructed my secretary to ensure I wasn't disturbed for the rest of the afternoon, then called my counterpart in the security division. Dan Taylor, a stellar engineer and longtime friend, agreed to meet promptly. He mentioned he'd already be coming my way to drop off some blueprints for copying. I informed my secretary that Dan could enter my office as soon as he arrived. True to his word, Dan knocked on my door just 20 minutes later. I requested him to come in and close the door, noting that I needed his help. Dan remarked that I looked like I had seen a ghost, to which I responded by recounting the shocking discovery I had made earlier. I explained to Dan that I had caught my wife and her boss having an affair in our house, specifically in our bedroom. Despite the disbelief, I assured him it was true, detailing how I found them together when I came home to pick up my daughter from school. I refrained from confronting them at the moment, prioritizing my daughter's well-being by having her wait in the car while I quietly left and took her to my mom's house. Dan expressed his sympathy and asked about my plan moving forward. I admitted uncertainty, but emphasized the need for evidence, mentioning my intention to gather audio and video recordings of their encounters. I sought Dan's assistance in acquiring security cameras and microphones to discreetly place around the house. Dan questioned the certainty of there being a next time, suggesting that the incident might have been isolated. However, I dismissed this possibility, citing conversations between my wife and her boss about regular rendezvous over the past 6 months. I explained my reasoning, noting the lack of alternative locations and the convenience of my empty house during work hours. After a few more minutes of discussion, we delved into the details. Dan mentioned having access to a new beta line of wireless miniature cameras and microphones compatible with my laptop or home computer. Additionally, he had a small voice-activated recorder I could discreetly place under Sherry's car seat to capture any conversations she might have while driving. It would only record her side of the conversation, but it was better than nothing. I expressed gratitude and informed him I'd collect everything from his office the following day. Returning home that evening proved to be the most challenging task I'd ever faced. I wasn't sure if I could face my wife and pretend nothing had happened. I decided the best course of action was to make Sherry believe I wasn't feeling well, which was true. I retrieved Shelby from my mom's, and upon arriving home, Sherry was preparing dinner in the kitchen. Upon seeing Shelby with me, she grew frantic. I questioned Sherry about her whereabouts and why she hadn't informed me about Shelby's illness, mentioning that I received a message from the school nurse on the answering machine. Sherry explained that she must have accidentally turned off her phone while showing houses and had been busy all day. I couldn't help but think cynically that she was likely preoccupied with her affair with her boss instead of attending to our daughter. Despite this, Sherry hugged Shelby and apologized before helping her to bed. I acknowledged that despite her flaws, my wife did love our kids, and it seemed I was the obstacle to her happiness. Sherry then returned to the kitchen to prepare soup for Shelby and finish dinner for the rest of us. Feeling unwell myself, I informed Sherry that I would sleep in the guest room that night, just in case I was contagious. She noted that I felt clammy and looked pale. Silently, I acknowledged the irony of feeling unwell after discovering my wife's affair. Without responding, I headed upstairs, initially dreading entering the master suite, but needing my grooming supplies, toothbrush, and work attire for the next day, so I forced myself into the room. A window was open, and the scent of lovemaking had dissipated. The bed was neatly made. She must have changed the sheets. It pained me to look at it. All I could envision was her boss having lovemaking with her, whispering sweet nothings about belonging to him alone forever. Anger surged within me, but I suppressed it. I needed to remain composed until I could unleash havoc upon them both. And I would. That much was certain. I gathered my necessities and retreated to the guest bedroom, shutting the door behind me. I stripped down to my underwear and slipped into bed. My body felt rigid. I wanted to weep, but I stifled the urge. I had a mission to accomplish, and I couldn't allow emotions to interfere. For hours I lay in the darkness, sleep evading me. After tending to the kids and putting them to bed, my wife entered the room. I pretended to be asleep. She pressed her palm against my forehead before exiting the room, shutting the door behind her. Sherry typically handled taking the kids to school, so I rose early, showered, and left the house before her awakening. It probably struck her as odd, but I could simply attribute it to needing to compensate for lost time from yesterday when I felt unwell. Frankly, I didn't care much about her opinion at this point. I just wanted to be free. Free from what? Until yesterday, I believed it was a blissful marriage founded on lifelong loyalty, honesty, and commitment. How painfully mistaken I was. Arriving at work before the rest of the staff, I brewed a pot of coffee and began outlining my strategies. I realized I needed to cancel our shared credit cards, transfer half of our joint accounts to a separate bank under my sole name, alter my will, life insurance, and 401k beneficiaries, removing Sherry and naming only Shelby and Ryan. It felt like such a trivial effort to dissolve the last 13 years of my life. It should have been more challenging. Deep down, I suspected it would become harder at some point. I also understood the necessity of securing a competent divorce attorney to protect myself from Sherry's potential exploitation. Being in a no-fault divorce state, infidelity wouldn't significantly affect the financial settlement, but it might aid in retaining custody of my children. Sherry had demonstrated my insignificance in her life, yet she was a devoted mother, and I didn't want to deprive her of her children. I merely sought joint custody to ensure I remained a vital presence in their lives. I fought to suppress thoughts of our love life and the humiliation of overhearing my wife praise her lover's superiority to me in every aspect. If I allowed myself to dwell on it now, I'd begin to doubt myself, which I couldn't afford at the moment. That reckoning would come later, and when it did, it would likely devastate me. With my to-do list complete, I phoned Dan's office. He assured me everything would be ready by noon and offered to assist me in installing and operating the equipment. As I attempted to focus on clearing paperwork from my desk, I noticed Sherry's call on my cell phone. Despite her typically affectionate tone, her voice only fueled my anger this time. Sherry expressed concern about my well-being, mentioning that she hadn't been able to check on me before I left that morning. I responded vaguely, stating that I needed to clear my head. She suggested an idea to make me feel better that evening, but internally, I couldn't help but feel resentful and deceived by her lies. However, I kept my response neutral, indicating that we would see. Sherry commented on my apparent lack of interest, to which I replied that I was preoccupied, rather than uninterested. We agreed to meet at home by 6, and she reassured me that she would be in the office all day if I needed to reach her. I phoned Dan, who confirmed everything was prepared, instructing me to meet him at the loading dock entrance. We loaded all the equipment into Dan's van, and with both of us working on the installation, we had it all set up and tested by 3:30. Then, we installed the software on my home office PC and configured a secure folder to collect and store everything captured by the cameras and microphones. We strategically placed bugs in the living room, kitchen, guest bedroom, and, notably, the master suite, ensuring the latter had 4 cameras to capture nearly every activity. As an additional measure, we installed a camera and microphone in the master bathroom, just in case the couple decided to shower together after their encounter. The system was motion-activated, with the cameras triggering the microphones. I was prepared. That night was exceptionally challenging for me. After dinner, and once the kids were asleep, I followed my wife to our bedroom. I turned away from her and pretended to fall asleep. Sherry noticed the change in our usual routine and asked if everything was all right. I expressed some insecurities about whether I was enough for her, to which she reassured me that I was more than enough and that she couldn't bear anything happening to me. She emphasized that I was her perfect lover. Despite her reassurances, I remained distant and brushed off her concern, stating that nothing was bothering me. I feigned exhaustion, closed my eyes, and attempted to sleep. Later, I heard Sherry softly crying. I felt no sympathy for her, but I pondered whether her tears stemmed from shame for her actions or from feeling mistreated by me again. I rose before her and seized the chance to place the voice recorder beneath the seat of her car. I also reviewed the video and audio recordings from the installed equipment, confirming that everything from the previous night was captured clearly, even in the dim nighttime conditions of our bedroom. Initially, Sherry was a bit curt, mentioning that I had said some hurtful things the night before. Then, she gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, and her demeanor shifted to cheerful. Perhaps it was due to her afternoon plans with her boss. I poured her a cup of coffee and informed her that I'd be locked in my office all day. She mentioned having to show several homes that afternoon and expressed confidence in making a significant sale, but assured she'd be able to pick up Shelby and Ryan after school. With a peck on her cheek, I headed towards the garage door. Sherry reminded me that I had forgotten to say, "I love you." She emphasized how important it was for her to hear those words from me every morning. I apologized, explaining that there was a lot on my mind, but Sherry insisted that it was important for her to hear those words. I promised not to forget in the future, and with that, I left. Yeah, I'll tell some girl how much I love her if and when I ever find another girl I can trust enough to fall in love with. The intel Sherry provided about showing homes all afternoon led me to think she'd probably be with her true love. I hoped so. I was tired of games and wanted this ordeal done. I spent the morning working in my office but kept glancing at my watch. Finally, at noon, I told my secretary I'd be gone for a few hours and put my plan in motion. I borrowed a company van and parked across from my house, waiting to see what happened. It wasn't until nearly 1 o'clock that I saw Sherry's car arrive, open the garage door, and park in her usual spot. When she entered the house without closing the garage, I figured she was either leaving again or expecting someone. 10 minutes later, I realized she was expecting someone as the same car from the day I caught them pulled into the garage, taking my place, just as he had taken my place in my wife's life. I saw him get out of the car and the garage door closed. I had to give it to them. They had the nerve to meet in my house, in my bed, to carry out their affair. It just proved they thought they wouldn't get caught or didn't care. Well, they'd soon find out they were wrong. They were caught. And I'd make sure they both cared with this final proof of my wife's infidelity. And knowing I'd soon have all the visual proof I needed of their affair, I finally let the tears fall. For 13 years, I was convinced my loving wife would never cheat on me, just as I'd never cheat on her. With the tears came doubts. Was he a better lover? Maybe better looking, but neither of us was exceptional. Why risk our marriages? I desperately wanted to confront them. But why? What would it achieve? I'd catch them, but I'd already done that once. Would I feel better by confronting her lover? Yes, but I'd likely go to jail. By this time, neither of them were worth it. My only worry was how this would affect my kids and his, as I was prepared to confront him, just as he had confronted me. By 2:30, they must have finished, as the garage door opened and he left 15 minutes later. My wife did the same, closing the garage door behind her. I knew she'd return home with the kids by 3:30, so I quickly parked in the garage and made my way to my home office. I didn't want to review all the footage, just ensure the evidence was safely on my hard drive. After 10 minutes, I'd had my fill. It wasn't an exact replay of their previous encounter, but it was explicit. They began by having lovemaking on the kitchen table where I eat. They joked about how many times they wondered if I'd ever realize I was dining where he had been closeness with her so often. Then, they moved to our bedroom, though not before her lover suggested using my daughter's room for a change of scenery. My wife adamantly refused, stating it was off limits to involve their kids' rooms. At least she seemed to have some principles, just not concerning me. In the bedroom, they resumed their activities. I noticed neither of them expressed love, but my wife continued to praise her boss as the best lover she'd ever had. However, I couldn't comprehend why they then moved to the throw rug by the living room fireplace, where they engaged once more when finished. I found it strange that she didn't bother changing the sheets, assuming she would do so when she returned with the kids at 3:30. This gave her plenty of time to air out the room and remove any evidence. Since I rarely arrived home before 6 and had secured the evidence I needed on my hard drive, I shut down the system and left the house without bothering to check the assumed mess on our marriage bed. I'd seen enough, and although my heart was hardened against my wife, I still felt sick inside, a sickness soon replaced by burning anger and hatred. I may have even smiled, knowing the hell I was about to unleash on their cheating heads. Back at work, I briefed Dan on everything. Like me, he couldn't comprehend how a supposedly loving wife like Sherry could do what was now clear. Not only did she break our sacred vows, but she also went out of her way to humiliate me to her lover, always affirming his superiority. All these thoughts plunged my soul into a deep abyss of pain and despair, from which I knew I had to emerge to complete my task of destroying them both. I needed to find a good divorce lawyer, and Dan suggested contacting the law firm the company used for recommendations. I spoke to a corporate lawyer there who gave me 3 names of divorce lawyers known for protecting husbands' rights. The first one was retiring and not taking new clients, but the second one agreed to meet me the next afternoon at 3. With that settled, I resolved to handle canceling credit cards, changing beneficiaries, and transferring funds the next morning. When I returned home that night, Sherry was in the kitchen preparing dinner while the kids did their homework in their rooms. She wore a yellow sundress and looked beautiful. For a moment, I thought my heart would break all over again. She was smiling and seemed so happy. I assumed it was her usual post-afternoon delight mood. She greeted me and asked about my day, mentioning that hers was great due to making a sale. I responded with mild interest, aware of the reason behind her happiness. I asked if anything else notable happened that day, or if she met any interesting people, to which she denied, stating that she was focused on work to return home to her family. Despite her reassurance, I couldn't shake the suspicion of her affair as I headed upstairs to change clothes. While changing, I noticed the sheets had been replaced and the room aired out. Upon returning to the kitchen, I mentioned the water on the shower floor and asked if she had showered that afternoon. She appeared startled and denied it, suggesting a possible clogged drain. I speculated about the possibility of someone sneaking into the house for a rendezvous and showering afterward, which seemed to unsettle her. She attempted to brush it off with humor. As dinner progressed, conversation was minimal. I surprised Sherry by switching seats with her, prompting her to question the change. I explained it as a desire for a change of scenery. She appeared puzzled and ate little, mainly moving food around on her plate. During dinner, the kids talked about their day, but Sherry and I mostly listened, making occasional comments. After we all helped clean the dishes, I returned to my office to work on my project. I reviewed footage from that day and selected suitable stills to turn into photographs, which I downloaded to a photo file for printing. Next, I carefully crafted wording for the signs I would create with the photographs. All that remained was to visit my lawyer to initiate the divorce, get my finances in order, and await the next visit from my wife and her lover. When I finally went to bed that night, Sherry was already asleep, or at least pretending to be. I was fairly certain my actions that evening had given her something to ponder. Not that it mattered. There was nothing she could say or do to change my mind about divorcing her for her infidelity, and there was a small silver lining in the fact that I believe I'd managed to make her at least somewhat uneasy. Today was Tuesday, and she had mentioned making another sale on Thursday, so I took that as a signal that she and her lover would be meeting on that day. That would also mark the day I brought them down. The following morning, I rose early again, showered, and left before Sherry woke up. I had a lot to accomplish and wanted to allocate as much time as possible to get it done. My lawyer appointment wasn't until 3, so I had plenty of time to handle all the financial matters. First, I visited HR, where I changed the beneficiary on my life insurance and 401k from Sherry to Shelby and Ryan. I received some odd looks from the woman assisting me, but I didn't feel obligated to explain my actions to her or anyone else. Next, I canceled all our joint credit cards and obtained new ones in my name alone. Then, I proceeded to the bank, where I transferred half of the funds from our joint checking and savings accounts to another bank in my name. I knew I needed to address our home, but I presumed the courts would allow Sherry to stay there with the kids, so I postponed action on that front until I consulted with my lawyer. At 3, I met with my lawyer, finding him to be agreeable enough. He cautioned me that since we were in a no-fault state, Sherry would likely get custody of Shelby and Ryan, and I'd lose the house and half of everything else to my wife, even with proof of her infidelity. I instructed him on how I wanted the petition written, and when he expressed doubt about my chances of taking nearly everything from her, I reassured him. I was confident I could persuade her to agree to whatever I wanted. He wasn't pleased, but he complied with my demands, assuring me he would have everything prepared for her to be served Friday morning. I also had him draft papers to file against her boss and his company for intentionally wrecking my marriage. Those documents would also be ready by Friday morning. I was prepared. When I returned home that evening, I kept my demeanor cool towards Sherry. Frankly, I had reached my limit and just wanted the whole ordeal to end so I could move on with my life. I knew there was still a lot of pain and heartache ahead, but I acknowledged there was no turning back. Besides, I'd finally be sharing the anguish and misery with my unfaithful wife and her despicable lover. After a subdued dinner with minimal conversation, I retired to my study, printed the photos of the lovers I intended to use, and crafted the signs without interruption. I also found time to compose a letter to Greg Allen's wife, enclosing prints of the large photos I planned to use on the posters, informing her that I had plenty of video evidence to provide her in case she decided to divorce her husband, as I was divorcing mine. Shortly after 11, I went to our bedroom to ensure Sherry was asleep, then made my way to her car, retrieved the voice-activated recorder from beneath her seat, rewound it, and listened to its contents. I overheard one side of a conversation that sounded like it was with Greg. The caller expressed gratitude for their time together that afternoon and mentioned missing Greg after they were together. They discussed the idea of spending a whole week together and fabricated a story about a real estate convention they must attend. The caller mentioned having to give Jack occasional attention to keep him happy, but expressed a desire to be exclusively with Greg. They confirmed plans for Thursday afternoon and ended the call. I was taken aback to discover that her words didn't sting as much as they had in the past. Perhaps there was still hope for me after all. Little did she realize how soon she would belong solely to him forever, and the knowledge that I was just one day away from dismantling their comfortable lives filled me with a sense of satisfaction. Revenge, I was realizing, wielded formidable power. I swapped out the tape with a fresh one and returned the recorder under her seat, hoping it would capture evidence of her anguish the next day when her world crumbled. I hardly slept a wink that night, not because I was heartbroken. I had surpassed that. No, my sleeplessness stemmed from the anticipation of everything I hoped would unfold the following day. For the last time, I rose from bed. While Sherry continued to slumber, I stood gazing at the woman who had once been my love, the mother of my children, the woman I had imagined spending the rest of my days with. Tears welled in my eyes as I realized I had shared my bed with her for the final time. Never again would our bodies entwine in passion. Never again would we cuddle or discuss our future. Our future was non-existent, and as I turned away from her and departed, I pondered whether she comprehended the toll she was about to pay for betraying me. She likely didn't, but she would soon learn. After showering, I left the house, stopped for breakfast at a diner, then briefly swung by work to inform my secretary of my absence for the day. I phoned Dan and briefed him on the impending events. He wished me luck, cautioned me to be cautious, and requested that I keep him updated on the proceedings. I made a brief visit to my lawyer's office to ensure all was in order for serving my wife and Greg Allen the following day. Following that, I called my wife to arrange picking up the kids from school. My mother had expressed a desire to have them for the long weekend, since they had no school on Friday. Thus, I planned to swing by the house around 3:45 to gather some belongings and transport the kids directly to Mom's. She enthusiastically approved, even suggesting we spend Saturday in bed together in her most seductive tone. I agreed nonchalantly before ending the call. I had reached a point where I couldn't tolerate her deceit any longer. I took my time returning home. By 12:30, I was parked nearby, awaiting the imminent events. My car was mostly concealed from view, but I had a clear line of sight to any vehicle entering my driveway. I didn't need to witness the garage door's movements. My wife and her lover were nothing if not predictable, and I was familiar with their routine. At 12:50, Sherry's car rolled into the driveway, followed 5 minutes later by Greg Allen's. The trap was set, and I was poised to ensnare them. I should have felt anguish knowing my wife and her boss were engaging in pleasure in our marital bed while I waited around the corner for them to finish. Yet, she had lost her ability to inflict pain upon me. It was astonishing how composed I felt as I envisioned the activities I knew they were engaging in together. It was almost reminiscent of recalling a low-budget adult film, lacking in substance but with a satisfying conclusion around 10 minutes to 3. I observed Alan's car reverse out of the driveway and depart. 10 minutes later, Sherry followed suit. Sweet. As she drove off, I observed her applying fresh lipstick. Once they were out of sight, I pulled into my garage and shut the door. With limited time on my hands, I headed to my office and reviewed the footage from that afternoon's encounter. Everything was captured, including the hurtful insults about his superiority in bed compared to me. However, this time, their words didn't affect me. After ensuring the footage was securely stored on my hard drive, I spent the next 10 minutes carrying my handcrafted signs, adorned with their photographs, upstairs and positioning them near the front door for easy access. Then, I packed essentials like a toothbrush and clothes for Shelby and Ryan into my car. The only remorse I felt about my impending actions was for the pain I was about to inflict on my beloved children. Yet, I found solace in knowing I hadn't caused the pain of their parents' separation. That responsibility rested solely on their mother's shoulders. She chose to engage in a prolonged affair, ultimately tearing our family apart. At 3:15, I drove to their school and was waiting when the final bell rang to pick them up. I informed them they'd spend the weekend with Grandma, which thrilled them given her penchant for spoiling them. 45 minutes later, I dropped them off and returned home, ready to set my plan in motion. And thus, we come full circle to where we began. Bed, table, and rug displayed on the lawn adorned with signs, watched by neighbors, awaiting Sherry's return to the dreadful truth that I held all the knowledge. That night, I expected to hear from Sherry, but I didn't. There was a late call from her cell phone, but when I answered, silence greeted me. An hour after Sherry departed, the police paid me a visit. While understanding, they insisted I remove the signs and photographs to avoid disturbing the peace and public indecency charges. I complied. They served their purpose, seen by my wife, and from the look on her face before I turned away, I knew her life had begun its descent into chaos. That evening I drowned my sorrows in a substantial amount of Maker's Mark and drifted into an alcoholic stupor. Friday morning greeted me with a monstrous hangover, yet despite it, I felt empowered. Though saddened and alone, I found strength in knowing I had subdued my anger long enough to exact revenge on my unfaithful wife and her lover. By noon, I glimpsed out the front window to find the rug, kitchen table, and bed gone, leaving only the mattress and stained sheets behind. I'd dispose of those later. The morning passed uneventfully, but by 3 p.m, chaos erupted. I was certain that Greg Adams' wife had received the letter and photographs that morning, and my lawyer had informed me that both Sherry and Greg Adams, along with his partners, had been served at their workplaces. He recounted how Sherry collapsed in tears upon being served, while Greg Adams disregarded her, unleashing threats against me. His partners retreated behind closed doors for 15 minutes before emerging to present Sherry with her final check and informing Greg that his partnership was terminated. When he informed them of his refusal to sell to them, they cited their corporate bylaws morality clause regarding love fraternization with staff members. This provision empowered them to sever all ties with him and his mistress. Concurrently, the receptionist at the front desk relayed that his wife was on the phone, urgently requesting to speak with him. She had received a letter and photos I had sent, informing him not to return home and notifying him of her intent to file for divorce the following day. Later, I was informed by one of the agency employees' husbands that after Adams was escorted out of the building, everyone turned their backs on my soon-to-be ex-wife. She remained on the floor for about 30 minutes, crying inconsolably. Eventually, she gathered herself enough to leave, though no one knew her whereabouts. The next day, Sherry finally called me, sounding distraught. She inquired about the children and whether they knew about the situation. I assured her they were safe at my mother's and wouldn't hear the details from me. She thanked me for my discretion and asked to retrieve some belongings, to which I agreed, offering to leave for a few hours. She requested to stay and talk, but I declined, leading to more tears from her. She pleaded for my understanding, expressing remorse and claiming she never intended to hurt me. I laughed at her apology, questioning how she could claim innocence when she had expressed love and longing for her lover, comparing him favorably to me. I accused her of betraying me with her words to him, saying I had recordings of her confessing these feelings. Despite her denial, I insisted that her words were recorded, and nothing she said could change how I felt about her. She professed her love for me, claiming she had always loved only me and didn't understand why she said those things to Greg. She explained that she had done it to boost his ego because he complained about his wife. I questioned her explanation, pointing out that she had torn me down to him and had lovemaking with him for 6 months. She insisted she never meant to hurt me and didn't mean any of it. When I pressed her for an explanation, she admitted that it felt dirty with Greg and that she felt she should be dirty with him, keeping it separate from what she had with me, which she described as loving and clean. I expressed disbelief at her actions and called her sick, admitting my own foolishness for not seeing it sooner. She begged for a chance to make it right, insisting that she loved only me and belonged to me. She pleaded for forgiveness and offered to come to me immediately, begging me not to leave her. I informed Sherry that I no longer loved her and that she was the one who left me. I condemned her actions with Greg over the past 6 months, stating that her behavior proved she didn't love me. I expressed disgust towards her and eagerly awaited her departure from my life. I rejected any possibility of reconciliation, expressing my disdain for her after what she had done with Greg. I emphasized that any future interaction would only be for the sake of our children, whom she had also damaged. I explained that while I wanted to spare our children pain, I had no intention of sparing her any consequences for her actions. I wanted her to feel the same pain she had caused me and Greg's wife. When she questioned why I told Greg's wife about their affair, I retorted that what she and Greg did was unfair to me and our children. I justified informing Greg's wife by highlighting the destruction of my family, the betrayal of our marital vows, and the need for Greg's wife to know the truth. Sherry expressed her desire to fight for our marriage, stating that she didn't want a divorce. I responded by saying there was nothing left to fight for and that I would rather die than remain married to her. I accused her of being delusional and out of her mind. She urged me to read the divorce petition she served me with, claiming that if I agreed to joint custody for our children, I could stay in the house and receive half of our assets. However, she threatened to share the videos of her affair if I didn't agree to her terms. When I doubted her willingness to follow through with the threat, she insisted that she could and would do it out of hatred towards me. She pleaded with me to sign the divorce papers, but I remained firm in my decision. In the end, she begged me to sign the papers, but I refused, insisting that she should sign them instead. After hanging up on her, Sherry signed the divorce papers, and the divorce was finalized in 6 months. She now lives with Shelby and Ryan in our former home, while I reside in a nearby condo. Despite the divorce, we remained in the same school district to minimize disruption for the kids, although they still felt the pain of the breakup. Shelby disclosed that their mother acknowledged her mistake, accepting that our marriage couldn't overcome it. However, we reassured the kids that we would always be there for them. As for what Sherry told her parents and sister about the breakup, I'm uncertain, but they still communicate with me, indicating she likely didn't place blame solely on me. My mother perceived the divorce as something neither Sherry nor I could move past. I had the chance to retrieve the audio recorder from Sherry's car one last time, capturing a memorable conversation. She called Greg and thanked him for their time together, expressing concern about my suspicions and suggesting they pause their affair temporarily. Upon arriving home, she discovered signs and photographs revealing my knowledge of her infidelity, leading to her panic and realization of the consequences. She called Greg in distress, informing him that I knew everything about their affair, and broke down into tears. It's been over a year since we endured those trying times, and gradually, I'm beginning to piece things back together. I still steer clear of dating, and will likely continue to do so for a while. The idea of reliving what I've just gone through makes me wary of diving into another serious relationship. Shelby mentioned that her mom went on one date but returned home in tears, and as far as she knows, hasn't dated since. Sherry found work as a receptionist in a retirement village and has put her real estate career on hold, at least for now. I've never found out if she keeps in touch with Greg Allen, and frankly, I don't care. Greg Allen and his wife divorced, and he's been struggling to find employment. Even though I didn't share the videos of their closeness encounters with anyone, Sherry knew I wasn't sympathetic towards Greg. It seems many businesses are wary of hiring someone with a reputation for seducing married women and causing marriages to dissolve. Although I blurred Sherry's face in the videos, I retained all the audio. I recently heard that Greg's ex-wife is dating a kind police officer, and it appears to be serious. Good for her. Speaking of Greg's former employer, to avoid negative publicity, they offered me a generous settlement to prevent a lawsuit. I accepted. As far as I'm concerned, that chapter is closed for now. My focus is solely on my children and their future. Perhaps one day, my own future will take precedence as well.
Joseph and Jessica first met at a church event in their East Coast city. They shared many interests: the beach, movies, professional sports, running, volleyball, and parties. Everyone thought they were a perfect match. They became a couple during a volleyball tournament when Joe's friend Liam, who was supposed to be Jessica's partner, had to drop out. He called them and said, "I can't play. You two should team up for the tournament." They agreed and practiced a bit before the tournament. Jessica was fearless, diving for the ball and setting it up well. Joe was tall and strong, delivering powerful punches. They were perfect partners on the court. They won the tournament and celebrated with other teams at a bar. Jessica frequently touched Joe, showing great interest in him, and he was captivated by her beauty and touch. That evening, they went to her apartment. She kicked off her shoes and relaxed on the sofa, and he sat next to her. "Wow, what an incredible day," Jess sighed. "This means a lot to me too," Joe said. "When Liam couldn't play, I thought we'd lose. When he introduced us, I thought you were cute but didn't expect we'd win." "Well, we did," Jess replied. "I think you're amazing at volleyball. Do you really think I'm cute?" "Something like that. The win and the party made everything feel surreal. I really like you," Joe said, quickly kissing her forehead. "I couldn't have imagined today would be this good," Joe continued. "It's unreal when a friend asks you to team up with someone so attractive that you can't focus. Then it turns out she's not just pretty, but really good at volleyball too." "Yes, it was a great day," Jess said. "Do you still have a dry mouth and feel dizzy?" "Yes," Joe admitted. She moved closer to him, her face inches from his, and ran her hand up his thigh and along the edge of his shorts. "How do you feel when I do this? Does it help?" Jess asked. "It makes me feel more dizzy and dry," Joe confessed. "And this?" She slid her hand up the fly of his shorts to his waist. He lost his breath. "It adds another dimension I can't describe." She leaned closer, looked into his eyes, and said, "This forces me." "What do you mean?" Joe asked. "It forces me to focus on how you turn me on rather than your volleyball skills," she clarified. "I have other skills besides volleyball," Joe remarked. "I'm not thinking about skills right now," she replied. He leaned in and kissed her. He felt the softness of her lips and her tongue against his. After a moment, he pulled away and looked at her beautiful face. "Why are you smiling?" she asked, her eyes sparkling and lips moist. "I'm amazed by your perfect lips, graceful eyelashes, and cute freckles. You're perfect, Jessica," Joe said. "This is all just overwhelming," Jess murmured. They were silent for the next 2 minutes. A tear rolled down her cheek. She moved closer and kissed him again, her tongue pressing against his. Her hand moved to the front of his shorts, testing his arousal. "I want to see what else I can make you feel. Come with me," Jess said. She led him to her bedroom. She quickly pulled down his shorts and removed his shirt. Then she took off her sleeveless t-shirt, revealing her lace sports bra. She smiled as he glanced from her eyes to her bra. She removed her shorts and underwear, and his mouth opened slightly at the sight. She smiled widely, then slowly removed her bra. She approached him, grabbed his arousal, and her touch took his breath away. "I love making you feel like this, Joe," Jess said. Without breaking eye contact, she pulled him toward the bed. "Now I want you to make me feel something." She leaned back against the bed, loosened her grip, and placed her hands on either side of his face, pulling his head down. Within minutes, he proved he handled this task as well as volleyball. Just before her first climax of the night, a thought flashed through her mind. He is perfect. After more than a year of dating, their life evolved. They chose a Caribbean island for their wedding destination. After about 2 years, they got married, vowing to become one life, one love. They both loved having lovemaking, although Joe sometimes struggled to keep up with Jess. They bought an old house in a great location, and within weeks, christened every room in the backyard on a moonless night. They were attractive. Joe once received a modeling offer, and Jess had the face of a cover girl. She had a C cup and just enough fat on her 5'8" body to be healthy. They were athletically built and stayed in excellent shape. They made good money, with her in technical equipment and him in software development. They had fun and worked a lot. His hobbies were mountain biking and photography, while hers included cooking, pop culture, and staying fit. Jess loved pop culture quizzes and showing off her cooking skills. Friends and family couldn't imagine a more perfect couple. They did everything together and agreed on almost everything, even politics. In an era where it was unpopular to be conservative, they both were, agreeing on candidates and bonds. On local election days, any disagreement was resolved immediately, even in front of others. Friends would smile and say, yes, they are perfect for each other. They excelled at their jobs and were respected team members. Joe's work in software development even helped Jess when she had issues with a new software package at her job. One evening, he heard her arguing in their office and went to see. After she explained the problem, he wrote a small routine that fixed it. Her work sped up, and the program worked better for everyone. She thanked him profusely, both verbally and physically. The company credited Jess for improving the program, and Joe used the routine in his work. They aimed for a good life, managing finances to enjoy vacations, a better house, and better cars. Occasionally, Jess earned large bonuses from major projects. They would assess the market, buy and renovate homes, and rent them out. After 7 years, they owned 3 houses and a condo. Joe managed renovations and rent collection, solving problems and making upgrades like installing electronic locks, security cameras, and repairing sprinklers. These activities took up his free time while Jess worked more at her company. One Saturday, shortly after their 9th anniversary, he planned to work on the lawn watering system at a rental property. Jess felt she lacked personal attention and took matters into her own hands. "Joe, baby, before you waste time with those water pipes, I need help with a problem," Jess called out. "Is there a visible leak?" he yelled from behind the garage door, about to head to his truck. "There aren't that many pipes going through our bedroom ceiling. You better check it out," she replied. He put down his tools and went upstairs. Entering the bedroom, he froze, his mouth open. She lay on the bed wearing only bud clamps on her chest with a small toy humming. Her knees were pulled up and spread apart. "What the?" Joe exclaimed. "Oh, baby," she whined, breathing heavily. "I think you need to stay home and hang out right here, right now." Her brow was furrowed and her lips were parted. Realizing he had been holding his breath, he dropped his car keys and tore off his clothes. Laying pipes can be a very complex task that requires a lot of thought and measurement. Completing the project involves extensive digging, threading, and pipe insertion. That day, he didn't leave the house, but did plenty of measuring with his eyes and thinking with his lips and tongue. Digging, threading, and inserting parts of the project went so smoothly that they both experienced multiple climaxes by the end. They had discussed having children once their finances allowed, and now that they owned several houses and had 6-figure bank accounts, Joe was eager to start that phase before they got older. However, she wanted to wait a bit longer to achieve a couple more career goals and ensure their financial future was secure. She got a promotion and felt she had a real career, not just a job. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they won a cornhole game at a party thrown by friends and family with the theme "Perfect for Each Other." They then took a 4-day tour of vineyards in 2 rented limousines. When they returned home, Joe and Jess began shedding their clothes as soon as they walked in the door and celebrated their anniversary in the living room, on the stairs, and in the bedroom. Life was good. They were perfect for each other. Jess was promoted to Director of Divisional Services at work and was thrilled to tell Joe. They celebrated at La Pomade and again at home. That evening, she met a new colleague, Curtis Stanley, who was tall, handsome, and in good shape. He was the new director of new accounts and traveled to their department monthly. Many women in the office were attracted to his easy smile, fashionable suits, stylish haircut, and flirtatious manner. Her workplace discouraged romantic relationships between different levels of the organizational chart, but there was no strict rule against relationships at the same level. The CEO, Miriam, was a divorced mother of 2 who enjoyed the company of handsome young men. Curtis noticed Jess and thought, "Damn, Jess is one hell of a hot thing." After learning about her perfect marriage, he decided that no marriage could be perfect without some physical adventure. Curtis and Jess went to lunch several times to discuss business since they were equals. Curtis did thorough research on her husband's job and her favorite places, activities, and foods. He saw that she was genuinely proud of her accomplishments and her recent promotion. In meetings and lunches, he often steered conversations to highlight her achievements and made her feel good about herself, telling her she was becoming a better person and more valuable because of her success. Their company focused its new account work on New York because it had several potential clients there, and Curtis targeted accounts that fell within Jess's zone. He frequently asked her to come to New York to explain how her division would provide excellent service once a client signed a contract. She excelled at this, and he ensured her contributions were highlighted, earning her praise from her boss and colleagues. He adeptly steered workplace discussions to emphasize her value and quality, making it clear how much the leadership team appreciated having someone of her caliber. When she visited New York for meetings, Curtis made sure they went to the best places and most interesting events. Jess looked forward to spending time with Curtis. A few months after her promotion, she became engrossed in this, and she and Joe were having lovemaking less frequently. Joe initiated a few discussions about their relationship, which usually turned into her complaining about work and stress. To make amends, she planned to surprise Joe for their anniversary by booking a September trip to Italy, a place he had always wanted to visit. She told him about it in May, and they celebrated by spending the day in bed or looking at places to visit during the trip. A few weeks later, her company scheduled an executive retreat for July in Miami, and she had to attend. She made a big decision and told Joe about it over dinner. "Joe, honey, I have bad and good news. What do you want to hear first?" "Just put it out there, baby," Joe replied. "Okay. I've decided that to save money so we can continue to grow our family, the September trip to Italy this year is being pushed back to a future date, and we'll be going to Miami in July instead." Joe was silent for at least a minute. "I thought you were having an executive retreat in Miami in July, baby." "Yes, this is great for us. We get a hotel room paid for by the company for the week, so that saves us a lot of money. It's a great holiday destination and party town with lots of great beaches and restaurants. I bet we can even play volleyball on the beach." "But if you're working, how will we play volleyball or do anything together?" Joe asked. "Work should be finished by lunchtime every day, and we can stay the following weekend to make sure we have time just for ourselves, darling." "Well, baby, I think we have enough money in the bank, and I'd love to spend a week in Miami, but I don't see why we have to cancel our trip to Italy. I haven't been in the new place too long, and I don't want to fly away so soon and remain in the dark for 2 weeks. I also don't think we'll ever have too much money in the bank, but that's beside the point. I have already canceled my tickets for September. We'll just have to restart this process sometime in the future, and now we can plan some fun things for Miami." Further discussion changed nothing. Joe decided to make a restaurant reservation in advance and look into volleyball tournaments happening while they were in Miami. Before leaving for Miami, Jess took another trip to New York. She never gave details about her trips, and when he asked about her activities after work, she usually mentioned dinner meetings with potential clients or solving a major problem with a West Coast client, taking up her evening on East Coast time. Miami was a great place to relax and enjoy the beach, and the restaurants were excellent too. They arrived on Sunday afternoon, checked into their hotel, and spent some time on the beach. They even played an hour of volleyball in a couple of matches. It was welcome night that day, and Jess asked if Joe could attend. Her boss Miriam, the CEO, allowed it. At the dinner party, Jess spent time with Curtis, which Joe didn't like. When he suggested she stay close to him or leave, she insisted it was just business, reminding him they were there for a business retreat. Noticing Joe lingering, Miriam, who had always found Joe attractive, started talking to him. She knew he was a technician in another industry and a competent person. After a few drinks, she became flirty, running her finger up and down his arm and grabbing his wrist. Joe politely made it clear he wasn't interested and walked away to the restroom to escape her. Miriam felt awkward and disliked it. The event finally ended, and Joe convinced Jess to hang out with him at the bar for more drinks, but Curtis soon joined them, cutting their time short. They decided to call it a night. Once in their room, Jess was too tired for any amorous activities. As Joe had feared, Jess's work sessions often ran much longer than expected, frequently until 5 p.m., with 4 nights of executive-only events. Joe would often sit in the hotel hallway waiting for her to finish work. He did get some volleyball time, and the beach was full of attractive women, but their attention wasn't what he wanted. Miriam, still resentful over Joe rejecting her advances, noticed Curtis making harsh remarks about people below the executive level and joined in. Later, she used Joe as an example of worker bees versus supervisors during hiring discussions. Miami wasn't a big anniversary celebration. Including weekends, they had lovemaking maybe 4 times. It was a disappointing anniversary for Joe, though Jess left feeling excited about her position in the company. When they returned from Miami, life resumed as usual. Joe worked, and Jess spent a lot of time working in New York. Whenever Joe asked about her time there, he received the standard answers. In mid-September, he tried to discuss it again. "Baby, until this year, I never thought your company was so focused on New York." "What changed?" Joe asked. "You're right, dear. That wasn't the case before, but now we're growing quickly, and it helps to have a critical mass of customers in one place so our people can handle multiple problems in one trip." "Why are you so busy with sales?" Joe questioned. "Miriam says having a post-sales service person with the client during part of the sales process results in higher closing rates. It seems to work. This is all part of a year-long push, and it should slow down after this. The company will still look for sales, but the focus will shift to services more than sales. I have more meetings in New York this week, and then just a trip to the Midwest in the first week of October." Joe was looking forward to having her home for the next week and hoped that once the year-long push was over, they could get back on track. They had become more like roommates, and their physical closeness was reduced to about 4 times a month. Jess returned from New York on Friday. Joe welcomed her with grilled steak and her favorite wine. She hugged him and gave him a brief kiss. A little later, she poured herself a second glass of wine. "Thank you for preparing this wonderful meal, dear. It's like a holiday," Joe said. "Baby, I'm just happy you'll be home for the next week. I hope we can relax a little," Jess responded. "The relaxation will be too short, honey," she replied. "I need to return to New York on Saturday evening." "Tomorrow? I thought you'd be home all next week. What about the weekend?" Joe was clearly upset. "I'm really sorry. This is how the plan falls apart," she said firmly. Joe stood up and silently put away the dishes. She sat like a leader, watching him move around the kitchen and dining room while sipping her wine. They barely spoke as he cleaned. Feeling that the evening wouldn't be enjoyable, he moved into the laundry room and started loading laundry. "Do you have anything I can wash before you leave, Jess?" he called out. "No, that's not necessary, Joe. Everything is clean," she replied. "You just returned. It's usually expensive to do laundry at a hotel. Does your company pay for this?" he asked. "No, I did it at Curtis's apartment," Jess admitted. "What? Why? Is that where you stayed the last couple of times in New York?" Joe looked at her silently, his mind in shock. It didn't make sense. "Were you trying to save money or something? Why did you stay with him?" "No, this wasn't about saving money. Look, there needs to be some change in our lives, in my life. Soon I'll be looking at 40 in the rearview mirror. When I reflect on my life, I want to see certain things. If my life stays the way it is, these things will never happen. The last 2 meetings in New York brought this all to the surface, Joe. Now I'm the executive director working with top managers. I've been collaborating with another director in our company for months. After work, we go to Broadway shows or the Metropolitan Museum of Art. We dine at the Rainbow Room and places like Luger doing fun and elegant things. He always wears impeccable tailored suits and treats me like a queen. These are the images I want to fill my life with. Joe, you're a good guy and we had great times, but I can't see someone like you in the life I envision. You will always be a good guy. A good-looking guy content to be a lower-level service provider. The guy who installs door locks and sprinklers. You will never become a leader. You will never be what I want or need. We are just different people." "But baby, we talked about children and our future together," Joe said. "I don't think my body has time to slow down to have babies." "It won't happen, Joe," Jess replied. "Damn, did you sleep with that guy in New York?" Joe asked, his voice rising. "You have no right to ask me that," Jess snapped. "Why not? I'm your husband, the person you married and once said you loved," Joe retorted. "This is my body. I will sleep with whoever I want. If I want to sleep with the entire New York Giants football team, it's none of your business. I think I never really loved you or should have. You need to understand it was a mistake and be mature about it. I'm filing for divorce. And don't call me baby anymore. It's not appropriate for someone who isn't your wife or won't be. We will no longer sleep in the same bed," Jess declared. Joe was completely stunned. Various thoughts swirled in his head. Strike this idiot. Knock some sense into Jess. Throw her out. Pack his bags and leave. What did he do so wrong that she felt the need to look elsewhere? Was he really a lower-class man compared to Jess or this other guy? "Let me try to understand, Jess. You're divorcing me because you prefer to be with another man who you think is better than me, right?" Joe asked, struggling to keep his composure. "Oh, no, yeah, I guess that's a fair summary. Joe, when you were first promoted, you didn't feel it. We celebrated and talked about how this could change our plans for kids. Since then, I've realized we're just different people," Jess explained. "But you always told me we were perfect for each other. Why not now, after spending time with some idiot director? Did you get this idea from him?" Joe pressed. "It's not just about him, and his name is Curtis. Others see it too," Jess said. "What do other people say or imply? That I'm not good enough to be with you?" Joe asked, incredulous. "People you know and respect," Jess replied. "Oh, really? Like who?" Joe demanded. "Miriam, you know, and Gloria, the financial director, and another director at work," Jess listed. "Seriously? I thought Miriam liked me. So your entire new executive group at work thinks I'm beneath you. Please don't delay, Joe. Are you taking the guest room, or am I? It's really not suitable for us to share a bed anymore," Jess said, her tone final. "Oh my God, Jess. I think all this time in New York means you've been sleeping with that other guy," Joe accused. "Joe, please, it's over," Jess stated firmly. "You're right about that, baby. I'll take the guest room," Joe said. Joe headed down the corridor and gathered his things for the night. While Jess was in New York, Joe searched for a family lawyer. He met an attractive blonde with sparkling eyes and a serious expression. When they sat down in her office, she asked, "How can I help you, Joseph?" "Please call me Joe," and I feel more comfortable with Melanie or just Mel. I need help with a divorce, Joe explained. I need details to give you appropriate advice, Mel responded. Joe explained the situation. Mel warned him about the possibility of physical misuse, asked about his feelings on reconciliation, and gave him a list of tasks to complete while she prepared the legal documents. He began taking the necessary steps to separate their finances and other legal relationships, such as car ownership. Dividing up the houses was difficult, so he and Mel worked out a fair offer. Joe notified their circle of friends and relatives. This action prompted an angry call from Jess in New York. "You're an idiot! Who gave you the right to announce our divorce to our friends and relatives?" Jess yelled. "You did, Jess," Joe replied calmly. "When?" Jess demanded. "When you said you were divorcing me and that you'd rather spend your life with that idiot in New York," Joe reminded her. "I expected we would just mention it during family events instead of making a huge announcement. Besides, I didn't give you permission to say that," Jess fumed. "What's wrong with the wording?" Joe asked, confused. Jess read from the note she received from her sister. "Unfortunately, I have to announce that Jess has decided to neglect her wedding vows and take a new lover from her company who seduced her. We will not be able to attend social events or otherwise participate in our former relationship with you as a loving couple. Please respect the sensitivity of our situation and allow us to end our marriage as soon as possible." "What's wrong with this, Jess? It makes it sound like I was a fool who let herself be seduced by some smarter or more powerful guy," Joe said, bewildered. "I stand by my opinion, Jess, although it doesn't matter now, does it? This has already been sent to everyone. You wanted a divorce, and I wouldn't stay married to you no matter how much I loved you a week ago. As you pointed out, it's inappropriate to stay with someone who's essentially an admitted strumpet. I've been tested for STDs and am awaiting the results. I suggest you do the same. If he slept with you while you were married to me, he could have slept with other fools who let themselves be seduced by him. You fool." She ended the call and almost threw the phone on the table. Although Joe got some satisfaction from this, he still didn't sleep well. He couldn't help but think about what he had done wrong. Thoughts of all the wonderful times they had together kept running through his mind. The trips they took, the places they made love, the ways they made love. The food seemed to lose its taste. Their lawyers did their jobs and the assets were divided. They each kept their own retirement accounts and the cash accounts were separated. Credit cards were canceled and reissued to individual accounts. He didn't want to live in the house they had lived in when they were in love, so she got it. He took the apartment since it was closer to the city center and better suited her new self-image. The documents were changed and recorded. He moved into an apartment since the two houses that remained were permanently rented out. His apartment was not far from the condominium they once owned together. 2 months after Jess announced the need for changes in her life, they no longer spoke, except for legal matters. Occasionally, they saw each other at the same church or social events. The first time she brought Curtis, she insisted on reintroducing him to Joe. Curtis extended his hand and grinned. "I've heard a lot about you, Joe." Joe looked him in the eyes, but didn't extend his hand. "I wish I knew where this was going when I first met you in Miami." He looked at Jess, shook his head, and turned away. As time went on, Joe divided their mutual friends into 2 groups, those he could trust and those who would likely relay anything he said back to Jess. Some people he decided would no longer be part of his close circle. He could still play catch or drink beer with them in a group, but he kept his feelings and inner thoughts to himself. Joe decided Neil Sedaka was right. Breaking up is hard. When Joe's friends at work found out, they were very supportive. His boss called him into the office and sat him down. "Joe, if you need anything, just let me know. This must be very difficult. If you need time or someone to talk to, I'm here. I've had relationship problems in the past, and sometimes it helps to talk things through to make decisions and keep things organized." "Thank you, Evan, for your kind words. I know it's hard to deal with all the aspects of this kind of problem, and if the thought of revenge hasn't arisen, it will. When it does, Joe, don't take any criminal action like punching the guy or anything that could land you in jail. A few minutes of satisfaction won't be worth potential years of legal pain and suffering." "That might be good advice, Evan. Thank you." Now that you mention it, it sounds like you have some experience in this area," Joe said. "Yes, maybe," Evan replied. "What kind of revenge can someone in my position get?" Joe asked. "That's a good question. There are different types of revenge. Look at this like a programming problem, Joe. Lay out everything, specifications, risks, unacceptable elements like physical violence, and various areas for potential retaliation. Maybe financial, maybe legal, maybe social. Decide what areas are important to these others. Be creative as you are in your work, Evan suggested. Okay, you've given me a lot to think about, Joe said. If you need time, just let me know, Joe, Evan added. Joe went out and sat down at the table to think. He got permission from Evan to use the conference room and got to work. Using an old board on an easel, he listed the following types of revenge: social, financial, professional, self-esteem, and legal. He decided to gather a couple of close friends from work to help him figure it out. They persuaded him to add physical and technical pain to the list. They created a matrix with these categories in the column on the left and ideas of revenge in each category on the right. Ideas flowed freely without judgment to encourage creativity, resulting in some outlandish and some promising ideas. At the end of the day, he took a photo of the board, placed it in an empty box, and put it in the closet at the back of the room. Evan called to say he hoped Joe would feel better and repeated his offer to help. However, he requested that Joe limit using other people's productive time to before lunch and after work. Joe thanked him for his patience. A couple of days later, a friend from church was playing racquetball with Joe. "Are you going to participate in the annual church beach volleyball tournament next month?" he asked Joe. "Well, I hadn't thought about it," Joe replied. "My volleyball partner and I broke up." "I know, but it always puts you in a good mood. You might want to join the boys' team or something," the friend suggested. "Probably not this year," Joe replied. "Okay, I saw that Jess checked in and thought of you. Did she sign up?" the friend asked. "Yeah, mixed couples," Joe said. "Oh, what's the registration deadline?" the friend asked. "A week before," Joe informed him. "Okay, thanks for the reminder," the friend said. After thinking about it all night, Joe took out the board. Upon entering the office, he drew a new line at the bottom and added sports results to the first column. At lunchtime, he asked his revenge team to work on the matrix in the conference room. That same day, he made a few calls and went across town for a drink with an old friend from his university days. The next day, Ben, one of his revenge crew friends, walked into his office and closed the door. "Joe, how serious are you about getting revenge on Jess and her world?" Ben asked. "That's a good question. Why?" Joe replied. "Because a lot of what we put into the matrix could be construed as just letting off steam, and some of it could be criminal, like physical violence," Ben explained. "But that was only because you guys thought it would be funny. I'm not actually going to eliminate anyone. I have to admit that I wouldn't feel any remorse if that fool disappeared. But I wouldn't take any action to liquidate him. And at this point, I would never take Jess back. I could never feel the same way or trust her," Joe clarified. "Okay, good to know. But there are other areas where the consequences could be much greater than we might think. If you ever thought you might get back together with Jessica, you'd want to avoid things like this," Ben warned. "Never again on God's green earth will I enter into any relationship with her that involves trust, affection, or physical contact. I was ready to do anything to show her how much she lost by leaving me and our marriage. I want her to deeply feel that spitting on a person's love and trust has consequences. Love and trust are crucial to a full and enjoyable life. And she knocked all of life's expectations out from under the man who loved her and gave her his heart and soul," Joe stated passionately. "Okay, Joe," Ben said. "And yet, Ben, where did you get this from?" Joe asked. "I have a few more things to think about, and then we might need some advice from Evan or someone with legal experience." "I'll call you back," Ben replied. Joe continued walking along the path. Some days were better than others. He tried to focus on work and volleyball. He found a new teammate and decided to participate in the tournament. At work, he erased the physical pain line from the matrix and directed his attention to new projects. He didn't hear anything else from Ben and figured it was probably just a mental exercise to remind him not to act impulsively. His boss didn't comment further on the situation. The volleyball tournament was a big event, attracting teams from neighboring states and other churches. As an outreach program, it invited participants not affiliated with any church. It had grown significantly from the Sunday church event that Jess and Joe won 10 years ago. This year it started on Friday and continued until Sunday lunch. After the awards ceremony, the churches hosted a huge barbecue feast. Jess and Curtis were quite a dynamic team and made it to the mixed doubles finals against Joe and his new partner, Deirdre D.D. Hughes. She was a stunning, green-eyed beauty in her 30s, with fiery red hair that formed a halo around her head. Her skin was covered in freckles from sun exposure, stretched smoothly over her 6-foot B-cup figure, which she covered with the 3/4 sleeve shirts she and Joe wore as a uniform. There was usually a decent crowd for the finals, but rumors of a grudge match drew even more spectators. Everyone wanted to see if there would be any emotional outbursts. The crowd was large. One potential issue could have caused tempers to flare. Joe didn't shake hands to start the match, claiming he had an arm injury and didn't want to risk it before the match. The match went fairly smoothly, favoring Joe and DD more than Jess and Curtis. Jess and Curtis were fast and strong, while Joe and DD moved like ballet dancers on the court. They always seemed to be in the right place to hit the ball or make a shot. DD was stunningly graceful, and her ability to fly into the air at incredible heights to strike or block left the audience in awe. During the second game, things took a different turn about 5 points in. Joe stopped aiming for the open court and started targeting his opponent's legs. On one of these shots, he appeared ready to hit the ball into the open court but then redirected it and struck Curtis square in the face, knocking him to the ground. The game paused for a few minutes as they wiped the blood from Curtis's nose. After that, Joe no longer aimed at his opponents. The match ended quickly in straight sets, 21-4, 21-0, a crushing defeat for Jess and Curtis. After the match, the teams met at the net to shake hands. Joe extended his hand and Jess asked, "What about your hand?" "It's okay, ma'am," Joe replied. Then he said loudly, "Good game." Quietly, so only she could hear, he added, "You're a team of losers." Jess yanked her hand away and swung at him, but he dodged as deftly as he had on the court. She glared at him, checking if anyone else had overheard. No one was close enough. Many viewers thought Jess's reaction was due to jealousy, seeing her as a sore loser. The awards ceremony went smoothly. Jess was upset when she learned that, for the first time, the small engraved plaque on the perpetual trophy would include not only the winners' names, but also their opponents' names and the score. At the afternoon feast, Liam asked DD, "You seem familiar to me. Have we met before?" "I don't think so, Liam," she replied. "But I get that comment often." DD and I were friends in school, Joe explained. "We played volleyball together. She was always better and made it to the Olympics for the second U.S. team in beach volleyball. She injured her ankle and had to leave earlier than expected, but she was on TV a lot and often gets recognized." "That makes sense," Liam admitted. Later that evening, after Joe took DD home, she invited him in for a nightcap. Once she had changed and they were settled on the couch, she said, "I know this started as a rematch, but during our training in today's tournament, I really enjoyed being together and spending time with you, Joey." She leaned over and kissed him. It was a long kiss that ended with her tongue lightly flicking across his lips as they parted. When he opened his eyes, he saw her lips. He noticed their wet contours and slightly unsteady position. His gaze trailed down the graceful lines of her jaw and neck to the top of her bosoms. The pattern of her freckles was a sweet counterpoint to her very feminine shoulders and figure. This fascinated him for a moment. He looked into her eyes again. Moisture was beginning to form, causing the green to sparkle in the soft lighting. "DD, I would really like to explore a relationship with you, but not now. I initially came to you for your performance, but now I think I may want more. However, right now it feels too much like a reflection of my past experiences. You deserve better than to be in a remake of an old story. I want to go on dates and get to know the DD you are now. This is more than fair. I really appreciate this perspective. I don't want to be anyone's reflection," Joe said. They finished the whiskey and agreed on a date in 3 weeks. He walked back to his apartment after a gentle kiss. The divorce was final, and Jess and Joe were now living separately. Legally, they were aware of some major events in each other's lives because they lived in the same part of town, had the same friends, and attended the same church. Back at work, Ben asked Joe how he was feeling and if he was ready to erase the Matrix. Joe thought and said, "I still feel I haven't resolved 10 years of lies or 10 years of love that was so worthless it could be discarded like an old shirt for a new one." "Okay, the idea I had has evolved, and I think we should look at the Matrix so you can decide how extreme you want to respond," Ben said. "Extreme? How so?" Joe asked. "This could have long-term consequences," Ben clarified. At noon, the V crew gathered in the conference room setting up the Matrix board. Before they started, Joe said, "Ben came up with a new point in the legal row, but first, let me fix this." Joe rewrote the category physical pain, and in the square next to it, in red, he wrote, "Bloody nose from volleyball." He continued to write in red for the social humiliation of his initial divorce announcement and his sporting humiliation. Red means it's done. "Now it's up to you, Ben." After Ben explained his idea, the room fell silent. His remarks concerned two aspects of the same action. The first action he had already discussed with Evan and was in the process of doing, but the second was left to Joe. A discussion followed about the pros and cons of the actions. The meeting adjourned, leaving Joe to decide whether to take action or not. Joe took a few weeks to consider his options, and his life moved on. He made his decision and moved forward with his life, which included finding out that Jess was pregnant and living with Curtis in the apartment she got after the divorce. Joe hadn't gone to church since the volleyball tournament, but one Sunday after church, he ran into Jess in the parking lot. "Are you going to congratulate me, Joe?" Jess asked. "I thought your hot body was too precious to bear children, Jess." "Or was his top-class seed too strong to resist?" Joe retorted. "It must have been top-class because it wasn't planned," Jess replied. "Loser. How long?" Joe asked. 7 months, Jess said. "So you didn't even wait until the divorce was final to get pregnant?" "A top-class seed is a top-class seed," Joe sneered. "Loser. As I recall looking at the trophy in the church window this morning, you and the idiot are losers," Jess shot back. "And you're an idiot. Just a simple-minded, low-class idiot. A loser in life who will never achieve anything," Joe spat. "Just in case you're wondering where I am if you don't see me next week, Curtis and I are going to Monte Carlo for a vacation. A top-class vacation," Jess said. "Loser. Keep an air sickness bag handy," Joe suggested, turning away. "Bye, loser," she said as she got into the car. Decisions had been made, actions had been taken, life went on. Jess's company encountered problems that began to complicate the situation. Miriam was on edge, as were the CFO and general counsel. As with all modern companies, this anxiety rippled through the organization. Several people were laid off, and budgets were tightened. Problems at work exacerbated tensions in Jess's apartment. As her pregnancy progressed, Curtis became less interested in doctor's visits and other events associated with childbirth. Changes at work interfered with his travel schedule, and he became increasingly irritable. His move to their city from New York did not make him as happy as he thought, and their relationship with the upper class became strained. The root cause of the company's recent problems was identified as a legal issue regarding their software. It turned out that the company they hired to create a critical software product had used a program that belonged to another company without permission. Since Jess's company paid for the product and shared ownership, they were also responsible for the stolen code. To make matters worse, her company and the software company were selling modified versions of the program to other companies for use in their service delivery processes. The software had been in use for several years, and no one could remember who was responsible for using the stolen code. People were laid off from the software company, and legal costs were taking a toll on Jess's company. The legal owner of the code demanded licensing fees and all the money Jess's company had earned from the software, plus fines. After months of legal battles, the options remained unchanged. Jess's company could either stop using the program or enter into a licensing agreement to pay for the rights to the key code. The software company that developed the program had recently closed down, and its employees had dispersed into the industry. Not using the program and trying to replace it would put Jess's company out of business due to the time required to develop a new solution. They were forced to make a cash deal for licensing, resulting in a 10-year declining payment schedule with high initial costs that would decrease to a reasonable annual figure. The financial strain led to even greater turmoil at Jess's company, with salaries and commissions cut or eliminated. By the time Jess's baby was due, she and Curtis were barely civil roommates. One day, Jess came home to find most of Curtis's things gone, and he was taking the last items out of the closet. "What are you doing, honey?" she asked. "I left the company for a new job on the West Coast. Need to go. Got a plane to catch," Curtis replied. "When will you be back? Our baby is due any minute," Jess said, her voice trembling. "I don't plan to return. You have health insurance to cover the birth," Curtis said flatly. "But what about raising and caring for him?" Jess asked, panic rising. "The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't for me. You know what kind of person I am, Jess? I love good restaurants, art museums, and holidays in Monte Carlo. I don't like diapers, strollers, or postponing vacations because of a child," Curtis explained. "Curtis, how can you say that? I thought you loved me. I thought our relationship would return to normal after the baby was born," Jess pleaded. "I have to go, Jess. Bye," Curtis said, closing the door behind him. Jess collapsed on the sofa in tears, sobbing uncontrollably. Suddenly, she felt a gush of liquid. "Oh my God, my water just broke," she thought. Trying to pull herself together, she called a friend from work. "Gloria, could you help me? My water just broke and Curtis is at the airport leaving," Jess said urgently. "Oh God, Jess, I'm afraid I can't. I'm at my sister's 2 hours away. Try calling Anita or Susan. I'm sorry, I can't help you right now." Gloria's cell phone went offline. Jess called the other two ladies. Anita's phone went to voicemail, and Susan's phone was not set up to receive messages. Her body was telling her there was no more time to waste. She stumbled into the bedroom, grabbed her baby bag, and headed to the car. She had difficulty getting into the BMW, but managed to open the door, throw her bag on the passenger seat, and get behind the wheel. She made it only half a mile before realizing she couldn't continue. The contractions made driving too difficult and dangerous. It dawned on her that someone else she knew lived very close and could get there quickly. She found the number on her phone and pressed the icon to dial. "Hello? Is this Jess?" answered the voice. "Oh, thank God. Joe, are you at home? Please help me right now," Jess pleaded. "Yes, I'm here. I was just getting ready for the evening. What do you need? And why are you calling me?" Joe asked, confused. "No time to explain." She didn't want to argue. If she had gotten to the point where she needed help and didn't want him to refuse, she thought he would respond to a simple plea. "I'm in my car on the street in front of the Ashton Glen Apartments. Please come right now. It's a matter of life and death," Jess said urgently. "I don't think you're dying, but I'm heading out now since you're very close," Joe replied. "Thank you very much." She ended the conversation. Another wave of contractions hit Jess. She left the headlights on, turned on her hazard lights, and winced as another contraction hit. Joe arrived about 3 minutes later, stopping at the curb right in front of her car. Her headlights illuminated a canary yellow Audi. Joe got out and walked over to her car. She rolled down the window, luckily between contractions. "Thank you very much for coming, Joe," Jess said, her voice strained. "Do you need help with the car, Jess?" Joe asked. "No, my water broke. The baby is due now, and I need your help to get to the hospital," Jess explained. "Where's Curtis?" Joe inquired. "He just left for the airport," Jess replied, her voice breaking. "While you're giving birth, just call him back," Joe suggested, incredulous. "He won't return," Jess said, starting to cry again. "What do you mean?" Joe asked, bewildered. "He broke up with me. He doesn't want a child," Jess managed to say through her sobs. "I can't understand you if you're crying, Jess," Joe said gently. "I'm really sorry. I'll try not to," Jess said, trying to compose herself. "Is he going back to New York?" Joe asked. "No, he left the company due to our financial difficulties. He got a job on the West Coast," Jess explained. Another contraction overwhelmed her. "I'll help you get to the hospital, Jess. First, give me your phone." She handed it to Joe. He dialed the number. "Yes, thank you, operator. There is a pregnant woman directly opposite the Ashton Glen Apartments on Avenel Drive. Please send an ambulance. Her water has broken and she's sitting in the driver's seat of a silver BMW with flashing lights. If you need more information, you can call this number back." He shoved the phone back into her hands. "Can you take me there, Joe? I don't want to spoil my new car," Jess said weakly. "Where did you get it? It looks very expensive, and your suit looks really great," Joe remarked. "It turns out that the program I wrote to help your company's new software work properly is owned by my company because my employment agreement gives them ownership of everything I create while working for them. But if the employee creates a huge cash flow, he gets a percentage of what he earns. Because your company sold the use of the program to other companies, all of those companies owed my company huge licensing fees. Remember those 6-figure bonuses you used to get from time to time? I received a 7-figure payment, and more payments are coming soon," Joe explained. Another wave of contractions hit Jess. "Jess, I see you are in no position to have a real conversation. The ambulance should arrive soon. I have to go. I have a date." "Bye, Jess," Joe said. Another painful and demanding wave hit Jess. Joe turned away and walked to his new car. "Joe, could you stay until the ambulance gets here and then take care of my car?" Jess pleaded. "I don't think so, Jess. That's what a husband, or at least the father of the child, would do," Joe replied coldly. "Joe!" Jess called out desperately. Opening the car door, Joe stopped, turned around, and said, "I think I can say that this idiot is an idiot and you are a cheating strumpet. You and that idiot Curtis are perfect for each other." He got into the car and drove away.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
There's an old saying that loose lips sink ships. Sometimes the best way to resolve a problem or a situation is to wait it out. The problem we humans have is that we are so busy trying to push the situation to get the problem behind us that we lose sight of what's right in front of us. After 3 years of marriage, my loving wife had filed for a divorce while I was on a 2-week run in the farthest corner of the company's sales territory. We sold computers to set up to run certain lines of equipment. I was one of the few that could also install them. As a result, I had been sent in to set 3 new installments up. In the divorce petition was the reason why she had filed. According to a third-party statement, I was having an ongoing affair with her father's secretary. It was Humus because his secretary worked at his state capital office. That was 275 miles roughly from where we lived in Jackson, Missouri. It made it sound like I was taking 2 days a week to travel to the capital to stay overnight in a hotel and drive back the next day. Upon my first day back, I was fired. No reason was given, but I was paid what was due according to the state's labor laws. I believed but could not prove it was because of what was being claimed by my wife in her divorce petition. My boss and my wife's family were members of the same community church. I smelled a setup. I had only met my father-in-law's secretary once, and that was during our formal engagement party. She had tried to come on to me, and I had shut her down. Someone had seen the chance for advantage and went for it. The question was who and why now. Rachel's father was more of a follower than a man who could stand on his own. He got into politics only when his father had decided to retire. His great-grandfather, a career politician, had known when the interstate was going to be built and had bought the land around it all throughout the state. He had one rule. He only leased the land for development. When the lease ran out, the improvements torn down ready for new development. The family ended up using some to develop their own in chain and bought other businesses. When he died, the family was super rich as a result and had continued on as he did. It was almost like a golden parachute for the whole family. He had won the seat in a landslide and had kept it ever since. It hadn't even been a week since I had been served in here. We were standing before Judge Donald McDonald. I had not even hired a lawyer and was sleeping at a friend's place until I got back on my feet. My wife's lawyer, a well-known feminist who was from state capital, wanted to get the court moving towards the divorce. Even to the judge, this just seemed to be rushed, and he wondered why. He was hoping to find something that would slow down the plaintiff's rush for judgment. It gave us both reasons for wanting to slow things down. What had stuck out right away was that my wife's lawyer had scheduled the first appointment before the judge the same day she filed. I listened with interest to what she had to say in her opening statement. The judge then asked me what I had to say. Your Honor, 2 things have happened. First of all, we are all here before you because of hearsay. There is no proof. As for my wife Rachel and I, as far as I knew, everything was fine. I said. Secondly, I believe it's primarily because my wife Rachel is about to come into the rest of her family trust. Under state law, when that happens, I automatically would be entitled to half if we got divorced. How soon is that going to happen? The judge asked. On her 25th birthday, which in less than 6 months away, I said. The judge picked up the petition and read the complaint through in full for the first time. After pausing for a few, he said, Mr. Richards, do you have anything further to add? Only that my former boss is my wife's father's best friend. They, like my wife and I, are members of the same church. When I returned from my last sales trip, I was terminated, and no reason was given. I explained. I request that my wife be forced to pay my lost wages until this is resolved. Her current trust is worth $10 million and is still being controlled by her father. On her next birthday, she gets full access to the rest, which will bring the total amount up to $100 million. At that time, according to the way the trust was set up, her father also loses his control over it. The judge turned to the feminist lawyer and asked, Do you wish to dispute the facts that were just explained to me, Ms. Livingston? No, Your Honor, that's why I filed, because the wife feels that there is no way they as a couple can work their differences out. Ms. Livingston explained. The judge saw me smiling. Any further thoughts, Mr. Richards? Only one, Your Honor, I said. My wife is 6 weeks pregnant with our first child, and I think that she is being influenced by others because of my point of view. Having perked the judge's interest, he said, Explain further, please. My wife's family and friends are all politically aligned with one party's point of view. I am an independent with more of a conservative point of view, I said. I feel her extended family are afraid that I am going to expose our unborn child to my point of view. With the political environment we are living with, the fact that hearsay is being used implies that this may be the very cause. There's no proof of that, Your Honor, Ms. Livingston said with excitement. You can't allow hearsay to be used in court. The judge looked at me with a big smile, then turned to my wife's lawyer. You're right, Ms. Livingston, we can't accept hearsay. That is why you're going to get the lady who provided the statement to appear before me so she can give the names of the party and their legal addresses who claim to witness these things happening. I want them so I can subpoena them so they can testify before me in court, the judge said in anger. And since Mr. Richards, as you have pointed out, has been evicted from his own house and fired because of those same influences that started this, I'm ordering Mrs. Richards to pay him $5,000 a month temporary support, retroactive from the day this was filed before the court, so his first payment is due. Your Honor, you can't do this, Ms. Livingston said. The witness lives and works in the capital. Was your client's husband allowed to get anything out of the house? Did his wife confront him with the accusation? Judge Donald asked. No, Your Honor, to both questions, she replied. This statement was just recently obtained. By whom? You acted just like a politician, saw a chance to earn $1 and take advantage of a situation to affect the outcome. Judge McDonald said firmly. Come back and hear again Ms. Livingston with a divorce that appears to be over the difference of views of those outsides of the family itself, and I will hold you in contempt. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, she said meekly. Ms. Livingston, in my court, I expect both parties to physically present, so have her here the next time you appear. One more question, who is paying your bill? The judge asked. John Brownstone, she answered. The local representative for the State House, the judge said, who spends 90% of his time at the state capitol. Yes, Your Honor, I said. He's my father-in-law. How do you get along? The judge asked. We tolerate each other, I said. When he starts talking about making the country a socialist country, I leave the room. We both know each other's views and I see his conduct as trying to put a wedge between my wife and I. So, you haven't talked to your wife since you have been served? The judge said. No, Your Honor. I did swing by the house to talk to her, but learned from the security hired by her father to watch the place that she was out of town and that the locks had been changed. She has either changed her phone number or blocked me. Ms. Livingston, where is Mrs. Richards currently residing? The judge asked. In the capital, with her father. Ms. Livingston responded. I see this is looking more and more like a hit job to me. Looks like Mr. Richards' view of things is exactly what is happening. I expect you both to appear before me a week from today at 9 a.m. The court is adjourned. The judge said. I showed up in court with a lawyer this time. I could see my wife Rachel sitting beside Ms. Livingston and a lady I did not know. After taking the bench, Judge Donald McDonald went right to work. Ms. Livingston, has the defendant being paid the court-ordered alimony? The judge asked. No, Your Honor. Her father is refusing to allow it to be paid out of the trust. Ms. Livingston replied. Let me address your client directly and have her answer through the mic. The judge said. Mrs. Richards, you are of legal age, are you not? Judge Donald asked. Yes, I am, Rachel replied. Where are you residing at this time? The judge asked. With my father at the house in Jefferson, Rachel replied. You are living off of your trust right now. What were you using for money these last 5 years? My husband and I both worked very hard. We did not need to touch the trust. 5 weeks ago, I told my father that I wanted some of the trust money to remodel one of the bedrooms into a nursery. Rachel explained. He decided I should quit my job because I could use the trust money. My husband said no, we can make it on our own. My father said he didn't want anything affecting the birth of the child, and my working may do that. This letter used to file from a divorce. How did you come in possession of it? The judge asked. My father said it was mailed to his office, and he brought it to me. Did your father out and out refuse to write the check from the trust for support? The judge asked. No. He said I should refuse to settle or pay anything until all the lawyers have worked everything out. Rachel said. So, since we need both our signatures on any trust check, he just refused to sign. Bad mistake, Mrs. Richards. I'm holding you in contempt of court. Officer, escort the lady to jail as soon as this hearing is over. What your father says or does has nothing to do with this case. You, in my eyes, are an adult and will be treated accordingly. Mrs. Richards, I order you to turn over possession of the marital home to Mr. Richards since you are not residing there. He helped pay for it, so he has just as much right to be there as you. Ms. Livingstone, if Mr. Richards is not back in his home by 4 this afternoon, I will hold you responsible. I looked at my wife as her face turned white. It was fun watching her have to deal with the fact that her father's wisdom had led her directly to jail. There was no way her dad could get here before the end of the court day, which meant Rachel would be exposed to a world she had never seen. Ms. Livingston was beginning to realize that she was not dealing with a liberal-minded judge. Ms. Livingston, I presume the other lady is the one that wrote the notarized hearsay letter claiming that there was an affair, so have her approach the mic. Name, age, occupation, and address, please. The judge said. Nora Charles, 34, an office clerk at the Capitol. She said before disclosing her address. Do you have the names and addresses I requested? The judge asked. Yes. How do you know these ladies? The judge asked, having a pretty good idea of what she was going to say. I work with them at the Capitol. She responded. She then walked up and handed him the list. Handing the paper to a clerk, he said, have the subpoenas drawn up and served. All charges are to be assigned to the plaintiff. Ms. Livingston was livid. She had never seen a judge act like him. Are there any further items to bring up today? The judge asked. How long will Mrs. Richards be held? Until someone presents this court with the alimony for this and next month's support. The judge said. Your Honor, that's not fair. Surely there is some wiggle room here. Ms. Livingston said. It appears that the only reason any of us are here is because of the conduct of a father who can't stay out of his daughter's business. The judge said firmly. It's obvious this situation is really all about the trust Mrs. Richards is coming into. Her father sees himself losing his control over it and her. He also seems to believe that if you don't live with the same views of things, you're a danger to his influence over his adult daughter. Therefore, Ms. Livingston, get to this court by next Friday a copy of Mrs. Richards's trust. The court is dismissed. I watched the court officer escort my wife out of the court across the street to the county jail. I knew it had to be humbling for her. The problem was she was constantly pulled by her father to help further his political career. I had refused to allow her to become the social butterfly he required. By marrying his daughter, I had brought an end to his eager pawn. For the first time in her life, she had to live within a budget. I realized that he had been slowly drawing her back into her former lifestyle. While I was on my last sales trip, he had gone for the kill. Everybody had underestimated the judge except for me. I had noticed Rachel that first year at Southeast Missourian University. Who wouldn't? She was a real looker. I knew that the men would be lining up to get the chance to date her, and I was right. With long black hair, a slender softy body whose natural curves drew you, and she could easily capture a man's attention and did. She had a too trusting personality which, if taken advantage of, could cause a lot of problems. She seemed to be involved in all social or political activities. It was and never would be my cup of tea. I had more important things to do. I had to work to eat and for room and board. For my parents, my borrowing the funds to attend school was too much. We were taught from being young to find a way to pay our way. It took 4 years, but I graduated with honors, just barely making it. There were rumors not proved that her graduation certificate was bought and paid for. 6 months later, John Brownstone was doing a tour with his daughter in a plant where I was installing the latest computer system and programming it. She strolled over to introduce herself, and when I got up to say hello, I was welcomed with the greatest smile. "Hi, David, we went to school together, but I never saw you outside of class," Rachel said. "We thought you were an introvert." "No, I had to work full-time to get through school," I disclosed. So, between school, studying, and full-time work hours, my social life got set to the side. Since then, I have lived as cheap as possible to cut down my student debt as much as possible. "Will you be in Cape Girardeau on Friday?" she asked. "Yes, I work out of Cape, so I still live there," I said. "I should be finished setting this new system tonight. I will spend tomorrow making sure it's all working before heading back." "Applebee's Friday is 7 then?" Rachel said. "It's a date," I replied. About an hour and a half later, just as I was finishing up, the general manager came over and told me that the representative's daughter had been asking questions about me. I told him that we had gone to school together but associated with different crowds. He smiled and said, "There's something in you that she's attracted to young man, so be careful because that lady is marriage material." We met and the evening went well. We went to a bar along the University Row and had a few dances. I guess she got upset when I didn't ask her for a second date. When she asked her friends what was wrong with her, they told her the simple truth. He still sees you as belonging to a separate world. He has worked hard to get where he is. You haven't worked an honest day in your life, nor do you appear to want to. He's at the point where he's ready to settle down and start a family. That means joint responsibility and an approach to life you don't have. You're still spreading your wings and living like nothing means anything. It had upset her family when she took a job, got an apartment, and started living in the real world like everyone else. It didn't take long for her to realize that she had no clue about how the real world worked. For Rachel, it was a life-changing experience. She was learning at her age what it was like to do the basics like cooking, dishes, and laundry. We all saw her struggle with normal things we do in life as she learned them as an adult. Some of her high-class friends dumped her as a result. They couldn't understand what she meant when she told them they needed to get off their privileged life and discover the reality of most. It had been a rough 6 months, but I had noticed she was adjusting. So, one Saturday, I saw her in the mall sitting on a bench looking sad and lost in thought. I went over and sat down beside her. "Rachel, there's a community dance being held on the fairgrounds tonight. Would you like to go with me?" I asked. "Why now?" she asked in complete surprise. "Because you now understand the world I live in and can see some of the phoniness of yours," I said. "As a result, you have grown up a lot the hard way. You have shown great courage and determination these past few months and have earned my respect." We learned that night that we both loved to dance. It was fun to see her actually enjoy herself without having any airs influencing her. She asked me on the way home why she'd been accepted by so many without question. I said, "Because you were just being yourself. For a person with your upbringing, that speaks volumes." As I walked her to her apartment door, we kissed for the first time. It wasn't long until we were seen as a couple. Her mother was thrilled with the changes in her daughter. It amazed her to find out that she had learned to be a pretty damn good cook. Her father was another story. He was not impressed that his daughter was becoming a well-balanced adult woman. He hated me because I would not discuss politics with him. One night, out of frustration, he went at me. His wife and daughter were shocked when I went at him, using his own arguments against him like the skilled politician he thought he was. Later, privately, Rachel's mother warned us that her husband hated to be made to look like a fool. "David, he expected you to fold because he thought you knew nothing. He was not prepared for the facts that came from your lips. He thought you were a shallow person. You proved you're not. He will hold a grudge until it forces him to try to take you down. I had learned young that power and influence earned was always respected by the one earning it. When being handed it on a silver platter, it became a tool to keep others under your control, and it became corrupted. It had been at my parents' place on Christmas Eve that I got down on my knee and presented the ring to her. Less than a year later, we were married. Her father wanted to make it the biggest event of the year. Rachel had shot that down fast. It was Monday afternoon before I went to see her. Rachel needed that time to think things out. Judge McDonald had done us all a favor by throwing her in jail. Her high and mighty father couldn't get to her now. Her mother had always been a buffer for us from him until they got divorced. I watched her walk in looking sad and depressed until she saw who her visitor was. Seeing it was me, she broke into a smile as the tears started to flow. Sitting down across from me, she said, "He did it again, didn't he?" "Looks like it," I replied. "I was told you had filed because of your affair," Rachel said. "When did you figure it all out?" "When Ms. Livingston had to reveal who was paying her bill," I said. "What's behind all of my dad's actions? It has to be more than just revenge against you?" Rachel said, "To me, it boils down to something that must be hidden in the trust." I said, "Because for some reason he wants our marriage ended before it fully takes effect." "When did you figure it out?" I asked. "You got to understand that being pregnant has got my emotions working irrationally at times. Dad broke the phony news of your affair, and I lost it." Rachel said, "If he put something in front of me, I signed it because I was upset over losing you. This weekend out of boredom I read all the documents. When I read that it was Dad's secretary that you're accused of sleeping with, I knew he had set us up. So, what are you going to do after you get released from jail?" I said with a big grin. "Going home with my hubby after telling my father we are done." Rachel said, "Remind me to tell my mother about his latest stunt." "I'm just glad we figured it out before our marriage was destroyed," I said. "Thanks for not saying I was a fool for falling for his bullshit," Rachel said. "If you were half the man you are, you still would be a better man than my father. David, always remember that I fell in love with the man you are. Don't ever change. It's you that keeps me grounded. Mom said you coming into my life made me a better and different person. She was right. My value and outlook about things have changed so much. I am so mad at myself for allowing myself to be drawn back into the bullshit." I went and visited my wife every day until Friday. We talked about everything. Rachel and I were surprised to learn that the judge did not want us sitting with our lawyers when we appeared before him this morning. The sheriff's department officer who told us said the judge does not want us identified before certain people are required to testify. As a result, my wife would be deliberately held back and would arrive late in her everyday clothing. Rachel and I walked hand in hand the Friday morning from the county jail and slid into the back of the courtroom just as Judge McDonald took his seat. "I see the three ladies who claim to have witnessed the romantic relationship of David Richards are here," the judge said. "I would like them to go stand beside him if he is here in this court." Rachel and I watched as the three ladies went over and stood beside a man sitting with her father, John Brownstone. "David Richards, will you please approach the bench?" the judge requested. The room went into shock as I stood up and joined the man the ladies had pointed out heading to the bench. When we both had almost reached him, he told us to stop. "Rachel Richards, would you come forward and identify which man is your husband?" the judge asked. Rachel came forward. Her eyes and face were smiling big time. Once she reached us, she stood beside me, taking my hand into hers. It appears that these three ladies had witnessed an affair by someone using David's name in a deliberate attempt to destroy his marriage and ruin his life, the judge said before going on. The question came to me was who would benefit from having this marriage break up? Who had the financial means to pay for it? I had to ask myself why. Those reasons were why I ordered that a copy of the trust be supplied to my office. I had a trust lawyer review it. "Stan Johnson, can you step forward and testify what you learned?" Rachel looked at me and whispered, "Do you know anything?" I whispered back, "No." Putting all the legalese into common language, there is a clause that says if Rachel Brownstone is not married by her 25th birthday, full control goes to her father until she reaches the age of 40. He said, "Since she is, it has legally been hers since the day she got married. Not has only the court been scammed, but it appears that Rachel has too. Stan, send a copy to the Attorney General office. Inform him of what we now know. Since John Brownstone is our state representative, it should be his office that investigates the situation to see if criminal charges should be laid." The judge said, "Does the plaintiff have something to say?" "Yes, Your Honor, I do." Rachel said, "I wish to withdraw my petition for divorce." "Granted." Judge McDonald said, "Hire Stan to get your trust legally in your hands." The court is dismissed. We watched the man claiming to be me taken in for questioning, along with her father who looked defeated. Ms. Livingston handed me the envelope containing the $10,000. "Mr. Richards, you could probably sue your father-in-law for a lot more than this," Ms. Livingston said. "I wonder how much they were all paid to try to get the divorce done." "We don't have to," Rachel said. "He has just written himself out of his grandchildren's lives forever." Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.